pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Roger, roll, Atlantic. Flight outside SE off. SE off.
Yikes. You bet.
Okay.
We don't need any more of these.
And good afternoon, and welcome to the Stennis Space Center in southern Mississippi, where NASA spaceflight is live and on the ground with both Philip Sloss and Brady Kenniston for the second go at the Green Run hot fire test of the SLS core stage for the Artemis 1 mission and the overall Artemis project. My name is Chris Gebhardt. I am the assistant managing editor here at NASA Spaceflight, and I am joined today by, now wait for it, folks, because the universe doesn't like it when we're on the stream together, but it's the other Chris. Chris, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How could we not have us both on during an RS-25 test? It's got to be a shuttle. It's got to be a shuttle situation here. So yeah, I am very excited about this because this is literally 4 hours 25s firing up, and hopefully this time we'll get the full duration. Because without the full duration, it doesn't pass the green run and it can't proceed to core shipping to KSC. So all fingers crossed for this one.
And Chris,
yes, indeed. And I think, yes, Michael.
Yeah, this is Michael. I'm running the back end today, but I do have to interrupt the live stream. I'm sorry, everyone. It would not be a NASA spaceflight live stream if we did not get Starship on the stream in some degree. And we have breaking news in Boca Chica right now. They are about to stack the first ever super heavy booster. So I know we have an important SLS test today, but we will obviously show this as it happens as well.
Gotcha, indeed. And yes, that is Michael.
Doesn't it? It seems up that Michael interrupts me whenever something's going on in Boca Chica. I get interrupted by Michael because there's always something going on, and I'm usually speaking when it's happening. So yeah, this is hilarious because we're seeing two monster rockets, the next two monster rockets, NASA's SLS, being tested, while SpaceX are about to stack the first super heavy booster. These are the two what we call super heavy launch vehicles, HLV. So this is really amazing timing for this both to be happening. It's not on purpose, guys. Trust me, it's not SpaceX trolling SLS or anything like that. This is just the way the worlds collide.
Indeed. Indeed, because like we've said many, many times, right? Like, you know, these two ongoing test programs, they are very, very different, but they're both very, very vital to what the U.S. space aspirations and goals are for the immediate and long-term future. So yeah, on your left, you have a super heavy booster from SpaceX being stacked. You have the nose cone simulator or mock-up for the version of the moonship for the Artemis program. So on the right, you have the core stage of the rocket that will be integral in launching those crew members for the Artemis program as well. So yeah, as we are counting down here toward that particular green run hot fire, again, we have Brady Kenniston on the ground, as well as our own Philip Sloss, who's busy interviewing people. So we're not sure he's going to be on the stream commentating, but he's busy interviewing folks down there for a bunch of articles and follow-up stuff that we have after the green run is over and complete. Because as Chris, as you were mentioning, hopefully this is a full duration hot fire, and we'll get to what that means in a minute, because there are a couple definitions you could go by. But yeah, hopefully it meets their minimum set of test requirements to get the data that they need to ship this core stage to Kennedy, because that's really the big milestone after this, is getting it shipped to Kennedy to get it stacked with those boosters, which I don't know about you, Chris, but man, seeing a full stack, a complete stack of twin solid rocket boosters brought back nice memories.
Yeah, I've just tweeted what a time to be alive, because we're just seeing Super Heavy BM1 about to stack as Artemis 1 SLS core stage is about to fire up. This is what we've been waiting for. We both remember the end of Shuttle, and the course there was Constellation and things like that. It wasn't as the mass media portrayed it to be the end of spaceflight, the end of NASA. It never was, but it certainly was an uncertain time, an uncertain period, and we never. I mean, we had Ares 5 in the Constellation program. That's the nearest thing to SLS, but that was a long way away. We had Ares 1, and that was about it. There's a few commercial companies coming up into the rise. SpaceX was starting off, really. They were in their early days. They were not really anywhere close to what we're looking at now with the Starship program. They were looking at just normal satellite launching rockets and potential of crew launch later. We're now
Yeah.
way past that now. We're into this stage of seeing these huge rockets that will take us beyond Earth orbit. That is the key there. Ever since, even including Shuttle, we were restricted from the Saturn V days where we were going to the moon. We were restricted to low Earth orbit. And now we're in the potential of two vehicles that could potentially launch people to beyond Earth orbit and beyond to Mars. And we're watching it now. We're watching the baby steps, watching the early stages of this program for both SpaceX commercial and NASA as an agency going forward with this, and at the same time.
Yeah.
I don't know if you just saw that, but I accidentally just showed a NASA feed because they were showing an amazing drone shot, and then they switched to a host. So if you've watched the NASA feed of the Green Run, the official NASA feed of the Green Run last time, you will note they like to have a lot of hosts talking and not a lot of rockets. So on our broadcast today, we plan to show a shot of Stennis the entire time unless we get interrupted by Starship. But of course, once we get into the business end of the countdown for SLS, we will have the test stand at Stennis on the screen the entire time, and we will also bring in the NASA broadcast with their views of the test stand as well. So, long story short, we will have all the best camera angles on our broadcast, and we will not put host on the screen because everyone wants to see the rocket. You don't want to see people talking.
It was quite funny during the NASA TV feed of the first static run. They were literally just showing endless Zoom chats. The reason why there was a reason for that. It was funny to see, but the reason they were doing it is because, and we're seeing the polar opposites here, and that's why I want to bring it up. We're seeing NASA promote the fact that they have thousands of employees and contractors and companies involved across the states, which is why it costs so much money. But that is a bonus to them because that plays into the old lawmaker situation. It gets them the funding they want because every district says, "Oh, we've got some workers involved in this. We're not going to vote against SLS anyway. We want the jobs." Unfortunately, that's why it gets a job title, sort of like slight at it. But at the same time, you can understand that's a good thing. That is good jobs being involved in building rockets. It's a good thing, and that's why they promote it. Whereas SpaceX go for the low cost, they go internal, they do everything in house as such, and they play on that. They say, "Well, this is why we can do things faster, we can do things cheaper because we've got everything sourced at our own base." They've built this Boca Chica launch site and production site in no time at a fraction of the cost compared to anywhere else, like ULA or anyone like that. So that's where the polar opposites are involved. But the beauty is that with the two things working in parallel, we may have a situation in the mid 2020s, maybe 2030s, where both of these rockets are working together. And that will get us to Mars faster. So that is a key thing there. With the government support and the commercial drive, these two things could work out and could be actual stablemates going forward.
You're seeing some shots there of the NASA drone footage of the test stand at Stennis Space Center. And hopefully, the latest information we have, I think, is from Eric Berger, who said they were targeting between 3 p.m. Central Time and 3:15 p.m. Central Time. So hopefully, just a couple of minutes
And
away from the business end of the countdown, but we'll have to see how this is going to play out.
Gotcha. And what I love about this drone footage is you can see some of the propellant barges that Stennis uses there to help fuel the SLS vehicle and keep it firmly replenished with, or not firmly, fully replenished. There we go. That's the right word. Fully replenished with its liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen as it goes through its thermal conditioning and its simulated countdown as it would if it were sitting on the launch pad at the Kennedy Space Center. But as always, it's not just about us talking here at NASA Spaceflight, although you have two Chris's on the stream. So if you ask a shuttle question, all bets are off that there'll be another one answered before the engines fire. Yeah, if you do have any questions, please tag us at NASA Spaceflight in chat. Tagging us that way puts the question, makes it more visible to us in a special program that Michael has written, and we can more easily see it and get it entered into the queue. And we will do our best to answer the questions that are asked. However, we always have way more questions asked, which we love, but unfortunately way more questions asked than we could answer. So sometimes it might take us a little while to get to your questions too, but we will do our very best. And right off the bat here, I wanted to read a couple of a couple of super chats. The Mosh Pit God with $10 saying Orange Rocket good. I think that's a great super chat to begin the day with. Yes, indeed, Orange Rocket good. Another one from Cassie W, $5 saying hi from Joss and Cassie. All about the rocket love. We agree. All about the rocket love all around. CMP Railroad with $5. SpaceX, how could you make us decide which one to watch? Well, the good part is you don't have to decide which one to watch, because if they start doing something with the Super Heavy booster, we'll bring it to you right here as we're on the air for this one
Yeah.
as well.
We're gonna focus on the SLS hot fire
Yes.
while nothing's happening with Super Heavy. So right now we saw the crane was hooked up. I can go back to it for a second, but we're not seeing any lifting yet. So if they start lifting, rest assured we will jump to Super Heavy.
But of course, we are here first and foremost for the SLS Hotfire, and what you are now seeing is the control center at Stennis, where teams are monitoring the core stage and all of the parameters there as they head toward a targeted T0 here, coming up roughly a little more than an hour from now. I think soon, much sooner than that. I'm sorry, I got my time zones mixed up. Yeah, with a hot fire coming here shortly, expected within about half an hour or so. So let's keep going with some of the super chats here and some of our questions. Great question here from Michael. So, can the steams from the engine exhaust trigger lightning? Excellent question. So, not really in this regard. You are correct. It's just steam. It's water vapor is the exhaust from the engines. It burns hydrogen and oxygen, so it's very clear. It can rain, and if atmospheric conditions are correct, it could trigger lightning. But if those conditions were present at the test site, they wouldn't be firing up the engines to begin with, because they would need to be protecting the equipment and not trying to trigger lightning in that regard. So technically possible, but they wouldn't be testing in that type of a configuration if it were. This is actually a great shot. Look at that, of all four of them with their thermal blankets. And of course they shift away.
I don't get to control that. They go to a different video, so I go back to our camera. But
No. I agree. Yes. All good.
Can I just mention, Chris, the beauty of those engines? They are all shuttle veterans.
I know, right?
They have all flown. Now, that's the big debate in the community. The debate between, would you rather see those four engines which have flown a shuttle in a museum, or would you rather see them go out in one blaze of glory and be on the bottom of the ocean? It's a tough one. Personally, I'm in the camp of using them one final time. Everyone would like them to be reusable as they were designed to be and were on shuttle, but of course SLS is not reusable. So one fire. In fact, last chat, what's your thoughts? These RS-25s that have flown a shuttle in a museum, or fly one more time? Let's see what people say. And I'll annoy the moderators. Most people are saying museum.
Yeah. I don't know.
So,
it's a hard call.
The community say museum.
Yeah. So here's a good question from Matthew with a £5 super chat asking, why is there such a mammoth setup here for what is ultimately a static fire? Are SpaceX just better at testing than NASA? So no, it's not that they're better than testing. It's that the testing requirements are different. So SpaceX is able to build their test stands for the rocket that they have, whereas the test stands that you see at Stennis are capable of handling multiple different vehicles, right? So you have to have more of a structure that can handle different commodities here and there, different thrust levels, different types of vehicles that are being tested, because it's not just the SLS, it's not just the RS-25 engines that the SLS uses. There's also the engines for the Delta IV Heavy that are coming through, Relativity, Firefly are there as well. A bunch of companies actually use the grounds of Stennis for testing and acceptance. So what NASA actually did was build a multi-user engine and rocket test facility that people could use if they wanted to, or that different companies could use if they wanted to. So it's just a different design. And specifically, they were doing this back in the 1960s. So what you're looking at here are some of the original stands that were used for the acceptance testing and firing of the Saturn V stages and the Saturn IB stages, the Saturn 1B stages that were used throughout the Apollo program. And then they were converted and used for Shuttle, and then they were converted and used for various other organizations and entities throughout the years. So it just so happens that the SLS core stage is what's on there now, and there are those engines again. And you can see the gray nozzles protruding down from those white little cones that cover them. Those are the thermal protection system blankets. And everything. Well, here's a good thing about the RS-25s, which confusingly begins with an image of Hubble. And a Mercury Redstone Atlas. Okay. I'm not sure what this history behind. Okay, there we go. Okay. I was gonna say I'm not sure what we're showing there, but or what NASA was showing there, but that was definitely the NASA feed. Yes.
Like I mentioned, the NASA feed has a bunch of random pre-roll videos and hosting talking, so we'll keep our cameras on the test stand thanks to Brady, who has set up this camera at the media viewing place, so he's got this great shot of the test stand, and hopefully as you get closer to the test itself, NASA will focus their coverage on the actual test stand itself, and not pre-roll videos.
And Michael, have they said on their stream what the target time is?
No, they are just talking about
holding?
engine history and what the Artemis program is, and nothing directly related to the actual test status.
Okay.
So.
Okay, gotcha. So we're still standing by for that specific time there. So so Casey Edwards with a 10-pound super chat saying, go Team Space, cheers to all that you do at the NASA spaceflight team. Feels like there's so much going on in the space industry for this generation to really get excited about. I agree. That's a great way to put it too. There is a tremendous amount to be majorly excited about. Indeed. Taylor Vanderkamp with $5. Love these streams always. Keep up the good work. In this particular test, the thrust is 4. Yes, the thrust is 4. Dog Kraus with $5 saying rockets are good. We agree. Here's a good question, Chris. Comes from Mr. Toxic Hot Dog. Do you think the 2020 indeed? Do you think the 2024 deadline goal for the lunar landing is realistic, or do you think 2025 or a beyond landing will be more likely? Just curious on your take.
It wasn't realistic for a while, and I think NASA's recently admitted it's very much not going to be realistic under current funding. That could have been their way of saying give us more funds, but I don't think it is realistic anyway. And I think it was a political target to start with. So now that political constraint is out of the way, shall we say, I think they now can be more realistic about their schedule towards the moon. I would like them to be more realistic, because when you start getting what's called schedule pressure, you get the issues we've had, which leads to disasters. So I have no problem with them saying, I think maybe more 2025 now, maybe.
Oh.
X, who was seen on the left-hand side, may get to the moon faster. Now, they are under the HLS contract. They're bidding for the HLS contract, I should say, with their lunar starship. I don't think they'd want to gazump NASA as such by being on the moon sooner with their capability. They will stick to the plan of NASA and go with the HLS side of things. But I do believe that NASA will ultimately not be able to do 2024.
Yeah, I agree. I think late 2025 or 2026 is more probable in terms of what we'll see for spacesuit development, rocket integration, development of the landing systems and their specific funding structures, and everything. Because a lot of this will also have to will also boil down to the continued budgets that NASA gets, not just this year, but in upcoming years. So it will be interesting to see. But 2024, I personally don't think so, and I never thought that was a viable target to begin with, just from the sheer amount of work that was needed for it. Yeah.
If I could just take a question I just saw in the chat, just randomly.
Yeah.
I didn't get a name, but I just saw the question. It was a question relating to the reliability of these engines compared to Raptors and things like that. It's a very good question, because Raptors let's get my words out. The reliability of Raptors is not really there yet because they're a new engine and they're in development still. They're in the SM50 range, so they will get reliability with launches and with performance, which we've seen. To be fair, with the launches, they've been long duration firings during ascent, and they've had relights. Yes, some issues with relight, but they're obviously showing they're a viable engine. And the more they launch them, the more they will get the track record, and the more they'll develop them going forward with McGregor testing and things like that. The RS-25s or SSMEs, the RS-25Ds, were hugely reliable engines. They had one issue during one launch, which resulted in what's called ATO, which is abort to orbit. STS-51F, I believe it was, with Challenger. And that was a sensor issue. And that was luckily, thanks to the quick thinking of the booster operator at the Johnson Space Center, only was one engine out, and the abort to orbit was nominal, and there was no issue with the mission. Everything went fine. That was the only issue during 30 years of operation with the Space Shuttle fleet where the RS-25s had an issue during ascent. That is incredible to think about when you're talking about the complexity of this engine and its history. And I think that will play in very well for SLS, as much as they've been very much rebuffed and improved. And the RS-25E, which will be the expendable version of the RS-25, will gain from the heritage. I think the RS-25 engines are extremely reliable, so I've got no problem with them going forward.
And you see on your screen right there, NASA saying,
Yes.
stand by for the hot fire test time. So they do not know the hot fire test time yet.
Which would make sense in some regards, right? Because we always make a point of talking about the sort of trickiness of countdown timelines when you're in a test configuration. We do this a lot with SpaceX, and we need to be, we need to do that too, and make sure that the expectations are the same here with the SLS rocket, because ultimately it's a very similar test to what they're trying to do to prove out the vehicle and to prove out the systems and stress it in ways that it would never actually experience in flight. But if you can prove that it can survive those particular areas, and they know it will, they're just stressing it to verify their models on this. But if you can do all of that, then you've got a good vehicle. So once you get into a test campaign, yeah, there might have been little things that popped up here and there. That happens with SpaceX too, all the time. It could also be, like they're in a good configuration, they're gathering the data that they need, and they're just assessing when the most optimal time can be, right? Pushing into test windows doesn't necessarily mean anything is bad or anything is wrong, because ultimately these are gigantic learning curves for everyone and good moments to really test out the hardware as much as you possibly can, especially with SLS, where this is the only time they'll get to do that for this particular vehicle.
Yeah, and that audio we're piping in right now is actual audio from NASA's feed live from Stennis. That is the sound of SLS as it prepares for the test.
Awesome. And if you look over to the right-hand side of your screen there, you can see the hydrogen flare stack. So just like Starship used to do, where it would vent that methane out to a flare stack and it would be burned away harmlessly, that's what SLS has to do with its liquid hydrogen that boils off. So it boils off and it gets carried through the vent systems out to that flare stack where it is safely burned away. A couple of more questions here. Moldy Space Industries with $2 saying orange rocket orange. Good observation, Moldy Space Industries. I love it. Zach Tarbill with $2 saying thanks again for the great coverage. Go NSF. KH Benner saying super heavy booster on a crane has been lowered from when you first showed it, so they may be doing some movements there of it. Indeed. And Cliff Phillips, thank you so much for the new membership. That sort of sustaining membership really, really helps us out. We very much appreciated. And Cameron with $5 saying to the moon, although moon doesn't automatically guarantee a trip to the surface. But yes.
There's an Elon reference in there as well.
I think so too. Yes.
Yeah.
I lost it there for a second on my screen. To the moon, asterisk, to the moon does not imply or guarantee a trip to the object orbiting Earth known as the moon. Love it. So there are a lot of other good questions here, but I want to get to a couple of them really quick. So Bruce Wayne Hughes was asking, how much more thrust does SLS have than the Space Shuttle? Which is a great question because it is a shuttle-derived vehicle. So the shuttle used 3 RS-25 engines, although with Wayne Hale might be watching, so I need to call them what they were back then. Space Shuttle main engines. They have since been rebranded as the RS-25s, but they're the Space Shuttle main engines. It used 3 Space Shuttle main engines and 2 4-segment solid rocket boosters and had approximately 7 million pounds of thrust at liftoff. The SLS vehicle will have approximately 8.8 million pounds of thrust just after liftoff with 4 RS-25s and 2 5-segment solid rocket boosters. So a lot more initial thrust off the launch pad than the Space Shuttle did. And puts it more or less in line with the Saturn V, actually, for what it can do at liftoff. Here's another good question from Monica, who's asking, what part of the moon will Artemis 3 land on? I believe the only reference we've had was sort of a couple of years ago, reference to polar regions of the moon near those permanently shadowed craters that have water, but they definitely haven't selected a formal location yet, and they would not until a few months prior to the actual mission. I don't know if we've heard anything other than that polar reference, though, Chris.
No, it's still up in the air, isn't it? So it's one of those
Yeah.
wait and see situations.
Gotcha. So here's one that I know a lot of people are asking, so I think it's a good one to talk about. What are our thoughts on Bill Nelson, Chris?
Oh, right, yeah. It
Yeah.
seemed like some of the community was quite annoyed by it. I think mainly from a political standpoint, not his party, but the fact that he's a career politician. And I think we've been spoiled as much as he was a politician as well by Jim Bridenstine. I think anybody coming into that job now, filling his boots, has got a real tough job because he has been brilliant for NASA. He really has. And I hope that Bill Nelson will bring the advantage of his knowledge and his understanding of how NASA works to the table, and that will maybe convince a few people that he's good for the job. But yeah, the community is kind of like trapped him into this kind of SLS fandom situation because he's got that picture of him with Charlie Bolden showing, which was then a white SLS. Is how long ago it was before they decided not to paint them like the shuttle external tankers they stopped after SDS2. They have him tagged as an SLS fan. I have no doubt he's an SLS fan, but he has also been cited several times in the history of being a big fan of commercial space. So I don't think he'll be someone who will come into NASA, take over the reins and say, okay, let's pump everything we can to SLS and take the money away from commercial crew or commercial cargo or HLS or things like that. I really don't think he'll do that. I think his history is just being misconstrued as being that kind of like SLS supporter where he won't support anything else. But I think he supports all elements. It's just he's on a hiding for nothing following Jim Bridenstine. So he's got a lot of work to do to convince people he's in that kind of mold of thinking both agency and commercial going forward.
Yeah. Yeah, I know I said on social media earlier today that while I was happy with him as my senator when he was the senator from my state, I had mixed feelings about it. And my mixed feelings honestly stem from not yet fully knowing if that change that he had there, right, after supporting SLS, but then also becoming a supporter of commercial crew, was it because he represented a state that both of those were very important to, so he had to support both? Like, I'm not sure I know where he falls just yet on it. But I also don't really know how he'll do leading an agency through a time of a very significant continued change in the overall industry. And I just kind of keep coming back to, I'm not sure he was the most qualified person for the job, which I know isn't the end all be all of an assignment. I mean, Jim Bridenstine did great, and I really didn't want him to leave. But yeah, I take your point, Chris, because I think it's a very good one, that I wonder how much of our reactions to this are still being influenced by how well Bridenstine did and how sorry we were to see him leave, even though we understood why he left. Yeah.
I don't understand politics. I never have got into politics. I just not one of my things. But I'm just trying to work out why Jim Bridenstine felt he had to go because of the change of the political scene. Maybe is
So
it party loyalist, or was he just basically said, "I've done my 4-year tour. That's enough for me." What do you think?
I think it had less to do with the political reality because I don't think people from both sides wanted him to go. I think people wanted him to stay. No matter your political lean in that regard. And while it is true that heads of agencies typically will tender a formal letter of resignation if the party in the White House is changing. There are numerous examples where NASA administrators and other key high level government cabinet positions have been maintained between administrations. So it's not a mandatory thing that occurs. And I think for Bridenstine, based on what he had said, it really came down to more personal considerations and concerns. And I kind of got the feeling that he would have left anyway. Maybe not on the day that he did. I think the day he did was just convenient because it was the administration change. Um, but I don't get the feeling that even if the 2020 election had gone the other way in terms of the results, that he would have stayed for a prolonged period of time through a second administration.
Now, Michael, do we have an update on when they're going for T0 yet? Because the banner's gone. The waiting for a countdown is a banner which is now deceased, and people in chat are upset the banner's gone.
It sounds like they're coming up on the T-minus 10-minute poll. I'm
Oh,
not
good.
sure exactly when that's going to happen, but we should be hearing a poll here soon.
Okay, then Michael, I'm going to go ahead and run through what we can expect here because this is something that if they start the poll, we can stop
Yes,
and
go
then
for
pick
it.
up on the other side of it. Yeah. So explain what a hot fire is what Brendan Parr was asking, and what the process is today. And yes, because this is a process. Just by the way, the standing by for the hot fire test time, not our banner. That's NASA's banner. So yes, it's just in a more convenient place now. But yes, so what we can expect here is, so they will do a poll here to pick up from the T minus 10-minute mark. So right now they are T minus 10 minutes and counting, which during an SLS countdown is what would normally occur. You would fuel the vehicle, get the astronauts inside Orion, and then you would have a built-in hold at T minus 10 minutes to dot all your I's, cross all your T's, make sure everything's ready before picking up your count. So at the T minus 10-minute mark, the terminal count will begin. And this will be the stage controller. So the big orange tank that you see there, that stage's terminal countdown sequencer will have control of the test sequence and will be coordinating all of the various movements and activities that the stage's various systems and the ground systems need to do to prepare the vehicle for firing. Around the 5-minute mark, the core stage auxiliary power units, which provide hydraulics to the engines, will be started. And at about 4 minutes 45 seconds, the tank pressurization sequences will begin. So the vent valves on the liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen tanks will be closed, and helium will be used to begin pressurizing those tanks to what would be flight pressure, or in this case, firing pressure, to actually fire the RS-25 engines. At T minus 30 seconds, the terminal countdown sequencer on the stage will then hand off to the actual flight computers. The flight computers are not running the flight software for this test. They are running a slightly modified version of flight software known as the Green Run application software. So that will take control at T minus 30 seconds. That's basically the vehicle going internal, and the point in a countdown when SLS would assume control of its own countdown. Um, so very, very similar to when the Falcon 9s go internal at T minus 1 minute, and when the space shuttles used to have their auto sequence start at T minus 31 seconds. At T minus 12 seconds, the hydrogen burn-off system, the big sparks underneath the engines and around the engines, will ignite to help burn off excess gaseous hydrogen that's accumulated around the base of the engines. This will prevent that built-up hydrogen from combusting upon engine start in a bad way. So there's a very set limit of how much gaseous hydrogen can be in and around the engine section, and the hydrogen burn-off system will keep those, will help meet those criteria for the test. Then at T minus 6.5 seconds, the engine start sequence will begin. So starting at 6.6 seconds, Once every 120 milliseconds, one of those RS-25 engines will be commanded to ignite. They will at first come up to the original 100% rated performance level. That is a 100% of their original rated thrust back when they started flying in 1981 with the space shuttles. They will build up to that thrust, be checked out, and then at T0, which would be the simulated liftoff moment in a countdown, all four engines will throttle up to 109%, which is the maximum or 100% level on an SLS flight. And at that point, we're off and running, as they say, in the test sequence. And that's when things really pick up. So in the test sequence, after we pass the T0 mark, the engines will fire at 109% for the first minute of the test. And then beginning at T-minus 1 minute, a series of events will occur. So they will begin rapid fire thrust vector control movement of the engines. So basically, there are pistons inside of the engines for pitch and yaw, and they will start moving those as fast as they can on all engines to turn all four engines in circular patterns. And they're doing this because you would never actually run the engines and move them that fast during flight, but they want to make sure that the vehicle can withstand that type of insane scenario it would never actually do, because if it can survive that, then your systems can survive the much more benign flight environment that the vehicle will actually experience. During that motion stress test, which will take 33 seconds, so it'll go from T plus 60 seconds to T plus 1 minute and 33 seconds. During that throttle, which will really stress the hydraulic systems, they're also going to be throttling the engines, all four engines, back to 95% from 109. And then they'll throttle them back to 109%, mimicking the throttle down sequence that the engines will do as the vehicle ascends through maximum dynamic pressure. And actually changing the throttles on the engines as they're stressing the hydraulic system is an even bigger stress test for the vehicle. This is the point when they started doing that stress test in the first green run that we ran into problems. And we'll overview what happened in the first green run here in a minute, but it's right after that minute point when they start the first stress test on the vehicle's engines and hydraulic systems that the issue cropped up in the first one. But if they can get through the first, one and everything goes well, the second major check of the engines will begin 2.5 minutes after T0, 2.5 minutes into the firing. This is a prolonged, more than 2-minute test where they will basically be doing long frequency response tests. So they'll be moving the engines in various ways and monitoring them to really understand how the vibration frequencies that go through the structure of the entire core, how do those frequencies and vibrations change as propellant is being drained from the tanks? And those tanks are being refilled with their purge systems and their pressurization systems. So they'll be doing that from 2.5 minutes to 4.5 minutes. But very crucially, when they hit the 4-minute mark in the test, that's the minimum time they need to accomplish and gather enough data to call the test a success. So basically, they want to get to the full 8 minutes, but 4 minutes is what they actually need to complete the test. Which then actually raises the question, well, if they only need 4 minutes, why do they not shut down? Why are they going to burn basically to completion and burn a full duration? Because basically, by continuing to fire the stage for an additional 4 minutes, they can get other data that they don't need before flight, but that they would like to get before flight if at all possible. This includes a lot of data on how the temperatures on the outside and the inside of the tanks change as the propellant is drained from them. As well as how the pressurization systems work on the vehicle as well. And so as they continue going through that, they'll get some good data on that. And then the final test in the sequence will come at 7 minutes and 36 seconds into the firing, if they make it that far. At which point they will begin throttling all four engines back from 109% down to 85%, which is exactly what the vehicle will do during launch to help maintain 3G acceleration limits on the crew and the vehicle as the engines are preparing for shutdown. During that throttle back, they'll also do a third hydraulic stress test of the vehicle, moving the engines in that same circular pattern that they do 1 minute into flight. That'll be another stress test, which will end just over 8 minutes into flight. And then if all goes perfectly, and the test stand and all of the ground support equipment functions properly for the full 8 minutes. What will actually trigger the shutdown of the engines is when either the liquid oxygen tank or the liquid hydrogen tank engine cutoff sensors read dry, meaning the propellant has drained below a safe level in the tank, and that will trigger what's known as a low level cutoff of the engines and a shutdown of the stage and safing for that test. And I have to say, I can't believe I got through all of that before they did their poll. I'm impressed.
I found that very relaxing. Just listen to.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ye-
Thank you. And as we go through the test, we'll be calling out those milestones as well, but that's a very high level overview of what we're hoping for today. So yes.
Yes, all is quiet on NASA's feed right now. If there's anything important, I'll relay it, but it's just dead silence for the past 5 minutes, so we are not getting any official updates. So we are about as in the loop as all of you are viewing the stream. I'm sure everybody's wondering when this is going to happen, and probably within the next 30 minutes, but exactly when, we don't know.
Yes.
Yeah, NASA's not
so-
really been saying too much because Eric Berger's T0 has now gone past that point in time. Before then, Christian Davenport was saying that all is well from the NASA quotes. I think everything's fine. They're just holding and holding, and then hopefully we'll get into this T-minus 10-minute poll and then be into a point of time where we can tell what the T0 will be.
Indeed. So Chris, here's a good question on that comes up every once in a while, and you mentioned Senator Nelson's sort of getting lashed to SLS because of that picture of or the image of him, right? So here's a good question. Why does SLS look more similar to a shuttle external tank than it does the Saturn V?
Yeah, that is a good question. Basically, SLS is formed out what was called the 2010 Authorization Act, which was authored by Senator Bill Nelson. So that's where he gets tied to SLS quite a lot. He was his baby. The reason why it looks like an external tank is because it's on purpose. The Authorization Act demanded that it took the hardware from the Constellation program and the Shuttle program and then combined it into a heavy lift launch vehicle. They had what was called an oversight review, which was called the RAC, which is a design analysis cycle study, where they put all the ELVs, all the kerosene rockets, all the RP-1 rockets together and had a trade study to decide which rocket would be best for the purpose. The problem was the rules said it had to work within the Authorization Act, and the Authorization Act made it very heavily weighted towards what was SLS. So SLS was going to win that, and that was why there's a lot of well, you weren't fair. You didn't even invite ULA along to the trade study for the RP-1 rockets and things like that. So there was lots of iffy comments surrounding that whole decision point of going for SLS. But the basic outline is SLS is the heritage of Shuttle and the heritage of what was remaining from the Constellation program. And that's where we got the similar looking and similar technology, because they thought with all the tooling in place and all the experience in place, it would reduce the amount of time it would get to launch the thing, which has not happened. So yeah, there's lots of twos and fro's with that, but it literally is a shuttle-derived heavy launch vehicle.
Yeah. And there was a moment in its existence when it had the paint scheme of an Apollo, which was really just to separate it from Constellation's initial paint scheme, which was the same. It was purely political or PR driven as to why it had a paint scheme. It was never going to be painted like Apollo or like the first couple of shuttle external tanks that were white.
And there was actually the boosters which were painted in swooshes at one point.
Yes, I remember
renders,
that.
And I asked ATK at the time, I said, why are you putting swooshes on them? It looks a bit silly. They said, oh, it's a PR thing. It's never going to have that paint job. And people didn't believe me on Twitter when I said it's just for renders. It's not going to happen that way. They say, no. It's in renders. That's how it'll look on the launch pad. No, it won't. And it isn't. So that's why they like their paint jobs for promotional purposes.
Indeed. Okay, so while we wait for a time here for I'm sorry, sorry. While we wait for a time here for the hot fire or that poll, I'm gonna run through a couple more super chats here. David with a $5 super chat in relation to our conversation earlier about why not develop a new engine and let the space shuttle main engines that have flown be in museums. He says we could have advanced development of the RS-25E and F versions of the engines and put these actual flown RS-25Ds in museums. Yeah, could have been a point. Although the more advanced engines are coming in the RS-25Es range, so they are being developed right now. It is worth pointing out.
Yeah. And by the
Alexander,
way, just quickly, Chris is not the program manager in SLS. That was a NASA graphic.
Yes.
From NASA's feed. Chris is the assistant managing editor of NASA Spaceflight, our wonderful media outlet that is covering this launch.
I was gonna say my title changed drastically, and I didn't
Have
even
you been
know
moonlighted?
it. Right. Justin Moreno with the new membership. Thank you so much, as well as Charles with the new membership. Thank you. That sustaining membership really does mean a lot to us every single month. Very, very much appreciated. Alexander Ash with $5 with a £5 super chat saying this is a waste of government money and it's really expensive compared to the commercial sector. About £2 billion a launch, and Starship is about £136 million. I don't know if we know the Starship price.
We're gonna listen in here in a second.
Gotcha much.
There. Reminder to everybody, after we get past 557 and after we terminate LH2 system securing, we only have 2 minutes 35 seconds full time before we have to recycle back. Also another reminder to everybody, when we do the switch to internal power, we will get the Christmas tree effect on the avionics screen. So that is normal, that is to be expected. So just remind everybody that we will get that Christmas tree effect once we go into internal power. All right, sequencer on your command. Let's go ahead and initiate the terminal count sequencer for substep alpha and record the UTC time, please.
Copy. Okay. T count has resumed.
And give us a UTC real quick, please.
20, 2712.
Copy, 077 20 27 12.
Do you copy?
It sounds like that's going to be all we're getting right now. I hear more comms chatter coming. I'll let you know, Chris, but just over 10 minutes away.
Did they do the poll yet? I didn't hear that.
Yeah, not yet. I think we're just over 10 minutes.
Okay, gotcha. JJ, thank you so much.
Up here we go.
Oh, 9 minutes. Did they say 9 minutes?
Yeah,
All right, it sounds like we actually missed the poll, so we are in the terminal count sequence now, and we are standing by and listening as they progress through their steps.
Okay, so it sounds like NASA TV themselves missed the poll, but they are under T-minus 9 minutes and counting at this point, which would put the ignition time at 3:27. 3:27 or 3:28 in there somewhere, based on that timing. So yes, so at this point sorry, I'm going back. The stage controller's terminal countdown sequencer has control of the vehicle and is taking it through the initial steps in the final terminal countdown sequence as they head toward a firing 8 minutes from now. So in a couple of minutes, we will have the start of the auxiliary power units on the stage called the core stage APUs. And then shortly after that, we'll begin the tank pressurization sequence for the liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen tanks. So it is...
People keep asking about Boca Chica quickly, Chris. There is not much progress to report, so We're going to focus on SLS as we approach the business end of this countdown.
Yeah, indeed. Indeed. So, yes, heading toward a static fire here in about 7.5 minutes from now. So at this point, the water that is being deluged into the stand they're getting ready to transition that to its high flow rate around the aspirator ring. So there we go, 7 minutes to go. So based on that call out, it will be 3:38 on the dot. So 3:38 exactly will be the simulated T0 time, with ignition coming 6 seconds prior to that. But yes, one thing that water is a very, very critical
away from hot fire right now.
Sorry, So that water is very, very important to the stand and protecting the stand, not just from the acoustics, but from the heat of the engines too. So one reason we have said that and that NASA has said, is that 4 minutes is what they need to get all of their data. They would like to have a full duration firing of the stage, but if after that 4 minutes, something on the ground like the water pumps fail, they have to cut off the test, because they could literally destroy the test stand if that water
LH2 securing.
If that water is not flowing. So you could end up with a scenario where after 4 minutes, the stage itself is still operating absolutely fine, but your ground support equipment has incurred a failure that no longer makes it safe to continue. So that's how we can have a good and successful static fire as long as we reach 4 minutes. And if the reason for the early cutoff after that has nothing to do with the stage, NASA has completed the green run as they needed. They just didn't get the extra stuff they wanted. And they can move on. And while we're at this nice wide shot, your eyes do not deceive you. That is not another rocket sitting in the left-hand portion of the stand. That is a tank that basically serves as a stand-in for the Delta IV Common Booster Core. That side of the test stand is where they test fire the RS-68A engines for the Delta IV Heavy rocket. So that is what is on the opposite side.
Spin start.
Alrighty, there we go. So the hydraulic systems are starting to come up to their initial states. Here you can see that water flow that we were just talking about, and that will increase with intensity as we head toward the ignition of the engines. You can also see, with that banner gone, you can also see some of the propellant storage tanks, floating storage tanks that are used there at Stennis. Hop back over here really quick. So as we go into the test, and approach that final time, and so what happened last time was about a minute into the test firing, when they started the first big hydraulic action, where they started moving those 4 RS-25s as fast as they possibly could in a circle over and over and over and over again. It overstressed the hydraulic system, not to a point that wasn't safe, but it basically breached a test criteria limit, not a flight criteria limit. So they set some of the test criteria a bit conservative than they would on a flight, just to help added protection for the vehicle and the test stand. And the test ended up violating one of those conservative limits and kicked them out when hydraulic pressures and reservoir pressures in the hydraulic system dropped. They've adjusted that for this test to compensate, now that they know what that's going to look for, or know what that's going to look like in the data. So hopefully we will not have a repeat of that now. Looking at this image, though, you can see that water just spraying out of the rings there underneath the engines. This is what's called the low flow rate. That will transition to a much faster high flow rate here about a minute ahead of ignition, and we are about to cross the 3-minute mark in our timeline now. So at this point, tank pressurizations are underway on board the core stage, as everything heads toward what is hopefully a handoff to the stage's onboard computers at the T-minus 30-second mark, at which point the Green Run application software, or GRASS, will take control of the test flight or take control of the test firing and execute it per the pre-programmed script. it will be in the primary control mode, and the ground sequencer, the terminal count sequencer, as well as the ground systems at Stennis will also be monitoring the vehicle and system performance as well.
T-minus 2 minutes.
And that's 2 minutes.
I think I have our countdown clock synced as about as good as I'm going to get. It might be a couple seconds off, but I've done my best.
I think it's wonderful work.
We need Adrian to do a spreadsheet for Trivents and things like that again.
More mist. All right, so coming up on the 90-second mark at this point, the hydrogen tank and the liquid oxygen tank should both be at the proper flight or test pressures.
And Chris, we're getting lots of commentary on the NASA feed that I'm cutting out, but during the test, you might just have to watch it. I'm not sure if they're going to be talking over us or not, but we definitely want to hear a rocket roar.
Yeah, understood. And I plan to be mostly quiet during the test, but just come in every once in a while to explain what's happening right just now. But otherwise, yes.
T-minus 1 minute following personnel report. Go, no go for ALS, AEA, PEA,
Go.
AGA,
Go.
REA,
Go.
NEA,
Go.
NTC. Vehicle and B2 systems are go for ALS.
And you can see the high flow water rate there.
Basically the water system has come on full bore.
And transitioning to the stage's computers at 30 seconds.
30, we're in ALS.
And you just got the official start of ALS. Next up is the hydrogen burn-off igniters come on at 12 seconds before T0.
Show it! Show it!
H-boys on.
Go for engine start.
H-boys are on and engine starts has been okay.
And all personnel, we've got engine start and we're into the plus count. All personnel, please continue to monitor your system, and grass is in control.
All right. The engines are at 109% of rated power right now. Watch, those engines are going to begin to move very rapidly here in about 10 seconds.
Plus 60 seconds starting CBC profile number 1.
Okay, show the engines. The engines are moving rapidly at this point and throttling down to 95% from 109. I wish they'd show us the engines moving. There we go. Look at that. All right, and you can see the charring on those blankets is more or less expected.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, wait. Let's see. Oh, that is a bigger fire.
Copy. Do you want me to hold out ATS? I copy that. You can't pull it out.
They were expecting some of that. They are through the first major stress of the vehicle. Engines are just firing now. Next major test begins in 30 seconds.
Profile,
No one better than last time.
We have doubled the amount of time. Again, that fire is more or less expected.
starting the FRT profile.
All right, here comes the low long frequency response test. This is a 2-minute long test. Subtler movements of the engines on this one and how all of the vibrations are transferred across the stage. All right, so there is about a minute left in this second major test that they are doing here, and about 30 seconds of minimum firing time remaining until they can meet minimum test objectives. And 4 minutes is the mark. They have reached the minimum firing time needed to successfully complete the green run. Everything, as they say from here, is gravy. They are headed for a full flight duration now of 8 minutes, as long as the stage and the ground systems continue to work.
T plus 4 minutes 30 seconds, that should end the FRT profile.
That call out indicating that the second major test is complete. At this point, we are just firing the engines at 109% performance. And they are watching how the tanks are pressurized and how they are changing from a temperature perspective as those 4 RS-25s drain the propellant from the tank.
T plus 5 minutes.
We're just over 5.5 minutes in the plus count.
All continuing to go well. Just letting you all listen to the sounds of those engines. Everything very stable in the test right now. The next major event will begin in 1.5 minutes. That cloud that you are seeing is pure water vapor that actually produces rain.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any TCC violations, so copy, we're good. Thanks, sir.
Confirming that they're still good.
We're coming up on 7 minutes of the plus count.
T plus 7 minutes.
Beginning at 7 minutes 36 seconds, they'll begin throttling the 4 RS-25 engines back from 109% to 85%, and they will also repeat the circular motion as seen at the beginning of the test. That will last until 8 minutes 1 second.
And T plus 7 minutes 30 seconds, starting TVC profile number 2.
There we go. That test underway as the engines are being throttled back. Look at those movements. All right, at this point, the cutoff signal for the engines will be triggered by the low-level cutoff sensors, which are sensors mounted inside the liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen tanks that monitor fuel levels. As soon as they read dry, it will trigger a shutdown of the sequence here and an end to the test, and that could come at any moment now.
All right, so we're just over 8 minutes into the plus count.
Well, personnel is coming up hopefully on the lock depletion here, and we have a cutoff.
And there we go, a LOX low-level cutoff right as expected.
REA on channel 16. REA on channel 16, safe engine shutdown, please.
Safe engine shutdown.
And your input shutdown standby, correct?
Correct.
Okay, all personnel, that takes us to page 656. All personnel go to page 656 to start the post-hot fire shutdown securing operations.
Well, that was absolutely amazing.
Wow.
That went well.
Yeah. Can someone else talk for a second? Real quick?
Yeah. I wanted to be quiet during the test just in case we didn't want two people talking over any loops. So with you could cut yourself off when there was talking on a loop. That was a good test. There was that fire on the TPS blanket, which was quite pronounced. I think they will look at that. It was expected, but I didn't expect it to be that visual. I thought we'd see, some kind of like charring or something like that. But that's what it's designed for. That's why it's a TPS blanket, because they expect fire to be in that area. So that isn't a great deal. And also, the other thing is when it's during ascent, it's probably put out by the aerodynamics of it just going uphill. This thing is literally bolted to a test stand, and that's why the fire can just propagate on the TPS blanket. I would class all as a good test.
Look right there, Chris. We don't see any more residual fire.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it did seem to burn itself out. Yeah, and Chris, what I thought, I had the same thing where I was just, look at that, 499.6 seconds. And they were, and it was estimated to be 500-second firing. Pretty good. Pretty good. I mean, man, that nails the computer modeling for when they'd have a liquid oxygen low-level cutoff like that. So let's take a moment and talk about how they shut this down, right? Because it's not how it would actually happen in flight. So basically what they did today is they let the fuel sensors, basically the fuel gauge in the liquid oxygen tank, read, I'm at a dangerously low level. And because the RS-25 engines are hydrogen rich, you want to make sure you're not running out of liquid oxygen. So that's why you focus on the liquid oxygen side of the vehicle for these types of shutdowns. And basically they just let those sensors run dry. And as soon as they read dry, that triggers the system's computers to go, I'm running out of liquid oxygen. Oh no, I need to shut my engines down. That's not what they would actually do during flight. You would actually get an engine shutdown a couple of seconds earlier than that, reserving some margin inside of your tank. But for the test, part of what they wanted to do was test how those engine cutoff sensors would work. And they worked perfectly today because you heard them call out low-level LOX cutoff and everything, which was perfect.
And of course, the funny thing is, that sensor call out is what is on our promo. It's from the STS-93 launch. Yeah, where it was a LOX level low cutoff. That is not what they want during a shuttle mission, because their sensors are designed to stop the actual engines from firing, because if they fired when they went past that point, it would suck up ullage and would literally blow off the aft of the shuttle. So that would have been seriously bad, and that's why the sensors are there. It just shows those sensors, which they had so many problems with during STS-122, is an example where they had several scrubs because of these low-level cut-off sensors, which was part of the LH2 feed line sensor wiring, which was what the fault was. It took them months to get that sorted out. The fact that it's working first time on SLS is a great bonus.
I remember them soldering like the connections
on
Atlantis, like trying to figure out what the heck was wrong with these things, because they just couldn't figure it out. Like, I remember that.
If anybody searches goes onto our news site and searches ECO plus sensors, you'll get 22 articles. That's how big a deal that situation was during Shuttle.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, to the point where I remember during countdowns, right? And they do it with SLS too. So this is germane. It's not a rant. When they would start fueling the external tank and those ECO sensors would go wet, they would then cycle them dry and wet, like trying to make sure they were getting good signals from them. And I remember after the problem with those sensors, I remember the sense of relief every time it was when the message would come into us, ECO sensors are good. And it was like, oh, thank God.
Yeah. That's where the Yanks "You Bet Concur" comes from on our literally intro videos.
Yeah.
Our intro videos. It literally is that. That's John Shannon, who was the flight director. This is a beautiful story. It was John Shannon, the flight director on STS-93, asking him, was it a low-level cutoff? And he goes, "Yikes, you bet concur." And that's where the other controllers get involved. And John Shannon is now working for Boeing on the SLS program. So it's
he's
all
their
come
project
around full
manager.
circle.
Yeah,
Yes.
it really has. Yeah, it has. Oh my gosh! I mean, yeah, man, we could do like an entire NSF live just on the 93 launch and how what a miracle. I don't use that word lightly. What a miracle it was that thing made it to orbit on that flight. But anyway, happier things with Artemis. A massively successful test today. Let us not ever underestimate this. This was huge. It not only went the minimum duration of 4 minutes that they needed, it went the full duration, 8 minutes. It proved out the stages. It proved out a lot of what they needed with the stage. They've got a lot of data to go pour through and look over. And I won't speak for them, but all indications from what we heard and the call outs over the ComNet there, about the minor things they did see but were okay. Nothing that I heard gave any indication that we have a showstopper here to redo it. So with luck, and we'll wait for that official confirmation, what happens now is a continuation of the safing and securing of the vehicle, a 3-week dry out of the 4 RS-25 engines just to make sure no moisture is in them, and then maybe some minor thermal protection work on the bottom of it, but ship it to Kennedy in about a month. For launch would be the next major milestone. Again, once they look at the data and they confirm, but everything that we heard today is a good indication that it was an immensely successful firing of the core stage here.
Yeah, they're going to be overjoyed with that because there's so many things in consideration here. If this test had not gone well, and I don't mean blowing up on a test stand. Blowing up on a test stand would have been seriously bad for SLS program completely. But if they had to redo this test a third time, they would have delayed their shipping target towards KSC. They need to get this booster. Sorry, this booster. I'm so used to SpaceX these. They need to get this core stage into the VAB by the end of April. They need to do that to allow them to get stacking with the boosters on the ML1 mobile launcher, and then have a chance of getting to the end of the year, as much as that's pretty much ruled out now. They are looking for about February. If they can do it by February, or even late February, they'll be within their 1 year timeline on the boosters. That is a critical point where they run out of certification time if they delay any further. If that happens and they delay past end of February, early March, they will need to recertify them some way. And that would be recertifying against a commission, a presidential commission from the Challenger accident, to recertify past the 1 year clock on the seal. So it's a big deal. Right. This had to go well, and it has. And they now are within target of launching within a year.
Yeah. They really are. This went. I mean, we talk about critical path, right? And there is some element of the software that they're still in final testing and work for. Philip Sauce has a great article on that from a bit earlier this year on how the software, or last year, I think, end of last year, and how the software side of things were going. But yeah, we're within a year of them being able to do the Artemis 1 mission, I would say, from a hardware perspective now. I think the software is going to be there soon. I know they've kind of all but rolled out the end of the year and are into like early next year at this point. But I mean, I see no reason based on today why, from a hardware perspective, a launch in 11 months is not possible. You know, if they shoot for early next year.
Yeah, and there's people in chat saying NASA's TV coverage has been saying launch late this year. You got to remember, NASA's public image is very much PR exercise. I mean, that's not negative towards them. They've got to do that. The US taxpayer is literally their employer, so they have to come across as happy and everything's great and going well. Internally, they are not launching this year. They will try. They will find ways if they can to achieve it. But right now, the internal schedule forecast, which is the key thing here, the forecast is February 2022.
Yeah. Well, so that I mean, I'm still kind of riding.
I can tell the relief on your voice, Chris.
Oh my God, it was. I mean, because this isn't. The relief spans mainly from the very logical side of my brain was saying, this is NASA, this is Boeing. They have spent so much time. It's going to go fine. If there is an issue, it's going to be something on the ground side, right? That trips them up again, like the first one where they set a limit too high, right? But that's the logical part of your brain. And there's always the emotional part of your brain that's going, yep, and it's a rocket and this many things could go wrong. Especially the first time you fire one up. And this isn't like SpaceX where there's just another one waiting in the wings to come over. Like what you said about like if this had gone badly, it would have been a serious discussion on the future of the program. Right.
You like that camera cut, Chris?
There was a good camera cut, but the relief in my voice is not just because the stage is still sitting there. It's in large part a relief to the teams and the people at Stennis and Boeing and NASA who have poured over a year into this green run campaign and let us and I want to be clear about this. The fact that it took so long is not entirely cannot be blamed on them, right? They built in a lot of contingency time back when the firing of the stage was going to be in mid to late October. But they got hammered by hurricanes and tropical storms last year. They got hammered by the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, the immense sense of relief, not just in my voice, but you heard them clapping in the control center after the test was completed. I mean, this is a huge, huge moment for the teams and the program and just everything that they had to overcome just in this green run campaign alone. And it's also got to feel good for Boeing and all the teams who have worked on the core stage all along, because it has been a focus of the program for it being the long pole item for a long time. And to see it, yeah, I wonder which one.
What a wonderful view there. Two super heavy launch vehicles being prepared for what will be the future. The future where we'll be sending people, humans, back out beyond Earth orbit again, but this time sustainably and beyond. We're not looking for footprints on the moon anymore. We're looking for bases. And eventually, I bring it up every time, but that render SpaceX put out when Elon did his presentation for BFR at the time, that moon Mars-based Alpha, that city on Mars.
Oh, yeah.
That's what he wants. And I'll tell you one thing, Elon is not constrained by politics or by any funding constraints. It's a commercial, private company, SpaceX, that he's in charge of, and he wants it. And believe you me, I think we'll see it within the next 10, 15 years, where we'll at least start seeing the build of it. And those will be exciting, historic, first-time events for our species, making life multi-planetary. It's huge. It really is. This is, people put the news on, they'll see this, that, and the other. People are watching streams like this and following Mary's videos and everything that's going on within the space program. That's our future. That's our real future. And that's something to get inspired by.
Very much is. Oh,
and you can see on your screen, I mean, the Artemis program is not a just words and no actions type of thing. There is meaningful hardware being built all across the country. We're still waiting to hopefully see how much funding the human landing system is going to get. But as far as the rockets go, progress is definitely being made. I mean, of course, people would have liked to see SLS progress faster and on a bit of a thinner budget, but it is at least making progress, and we saw a great hot fire today.
And I cannot wait because this means I get to see it next here in Florida. Love it. When it arrives next month.
True,
It
yeah.
should be awesome.
It's coming to your neighborhood.
Yep. But like any good guest, I still have to drive an hour down to see it.
Well, should we take a couple final questions and wrap it up?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a good. I think that's a pretty good idea. I wonder what some of the questions are. Do you see one that strikes you right now?
Is the booster? I think the booster's going up. It's going up. The booster's going up. Okay, we're staying live. We're not ending.
Well, SpaceX is okay. Michael, are you able to take commentary?
Yeah, I can handle it. We will.
Okay.
We will show the super heavy booster stack. Nobody worry.
Okay.
I will update our overlay too. So we have.
Is definitely moving.
That is. I do not know if I will come back. I need to go make a phone call for us, so I don't know if I'll be back. But in case I'm not, I'm Chris Gebhardt. I'm the assistant managing editor of NASA Spaceflight. Stay right here. We're going to show you an exciting booster number 1 being stacked. But I have to go. Hopefully, I'll be back. But I will leave you in the capable hands of Chris Bergen and Michael Baylor.
And I cannot believe that this is happening within 20 minutes or 10 minutes. I think it was 20 minutes, whatever. I can't even keep track of the static fire test. I mean, 10 years ago, if you told somebody this would be happening to the space program, they would have told you were absolutely crazy. But it's very good to see that there is this much activity happening with the United States space program at this time.
And I was just getting a clip there for Twitter because this is something where I'm going to have to make the unfortunate tweet where all these SLS program people who follow me will say, "Oh, God, Chris has done lots of SLS tweets today." And I'm going to do a BM1 one.
There is the booster in the air. And I'm going to try to get... I'm working on trying to get another robot online. I don't want to move this one so we can get a time lapse, but we definitely have more than one robot in Boca Chica.
Well, I can take a question that's quite related to this. I think it was on the actual question queue. I don't know if it's still there or not, but it was asked about the static fire of BM1 being similar to an SLS green one. They don't do that. It's a different situation.
It's back. Sorry.
Right. Are we back? 5x5, we're back.
We should be back. That was 100% my fault. I may or may not have stopped.
There we go.
We have 2 different servers going, and I clicked the wrong button in my desperate panic to get another robot online, but we should be back. Thank you for the F's in chat that alerted Chris Bergen to the problem that is now fixed.
There we go. And the quality will be back to normal now if you're just catching up with that because it was just catching up with the reboost. So yeah, with BM1, this is not expected to launch. This is expected to be a ground system test where they can take it out to the launch pad. It'll be onto the Starship launch pad, by the way, not the Super Heavy orbital launch site just yet, which they're building, and they're building at pace. We've seen the videos from Mary. They really are building at pace. This will be just basically for the ground system equipment testing and also the internal workings of the tankage on Super Heavy. And hopefully with BM2, it'll be either a hop or a launch. We don't yet know. We do know that Elon first mentioned the testing for the Super Heavy will be literally related to hopping, but I think they may have expanded since then because that was before SN8. We've seen, obviously we've not seen the full cycle of a successful landing and then taking off the launch of landing pad. We have seen explosions each time, but each time they've launched properly, they've had a lot of success with the Starship program. Let's be under no misconceptions about this. SN8, SN9, SN10 all did extremely good. They did the ascent, the flip, the belly flop landing. They've just got to get the landing part right. They've sorted out the situation of the flip maneuver. They've got the landing on target each single time. They've all gone road on the landing pad. Sorry?
Look how much that's moving around.
That is swinging. Yes, it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Don't hit the other tank. My word.
that looks slightly precarious. If you see from this other camera, the crane is actually lifting it through the roof of the high bay. They cut a hole in the high bay roof so that the crane could reach down and stack the boosters.
It's not the sort of thing where you can get these people to grab it. This will be a heavy structure. Yeah, well, actually, what we'll see is this tankage being lowered eventually on top, and they've got those like guides where they can bring them in, a bit like you've seen with nurse code stacking recently in the high bay with SN 9, 10, and 11. So yeah, it's something where once this has been stacked, it's going to be a huge structure, and when we see this thing roll out to the suborbital pad, that will be something unique as well. We've seen the actual starships rolling out down Highway 4. And they are a tall sight to see on those roll lists. So when we see this thing rolling down the road, it'll be something surreal. If you'll give me a second, I'm going to tweet this out. Because I don't think many people are aware we're live on this.
No, and I'm trying to get the stream title changed to say SLS hot fire test and super heavy booster stacking. If you're just joining the stream and you're confused what's happening, SLS just had a great full duration firing of its 4 RS-25 engines on the core stage, and we were about to end the stream when SpaceX decided it would be a good time to stack the first ever super heavy booster, which is of course the first stage for SpaceX's super heavy vehicle, which is in the same caliber of class as SLS. So quite incredible to have such progress of the two super heavy lift vehicles being built in the United States happening at the same time. It's pretty exciting to see this much progress happening, but we're working on getting the stream title updated and trying to get the word out about this exciting bonus event today. But wow, look at that lift now. It's definitely going up higher, and I'm not sure how much room to have in the high bay hole through the roof to maneuver it, but I'm interested to see if they're actually going to slide the top section of the booster over with the crane, or if the lower section of the booster might be on roll lifts, and perhaps they will slide it underneath. Roll lifts or self-propelled modular transporters are those large transporters that they can lift up the Starship sections and move them around with. But like I mentioned, the crane is currently lifting the liquid oxygen stack, which is the section in the air right now, through a hole in the roof of the high bay.
Yeah, that's a good question. We've never seen this before. This is the first time operation. So we are learning as we're watching. But that makes a lot of sense that it will lift this to the height of clearance and then literally roll over the bottom tankage and then place on top rather than swinging over, because I don't think we've seen from RGV the actual aerial photographs, the hole in the roof is very small. There's not enough translation to move it across the other side.
And another element, Chris, is that we saw there is a bridge crane that they are currently installing. It arrived yesterday. That'll be located at the top of the high bay for stacking operations. And I'm not sure if that would be used for a full super heavy stacking or just a partial stacking. It's because they first stack each of these two sections you can see. Those are originally lots of small components that could stack together in the high bay, and then finally they stack the final two completed pieces. But there is some speculation about whether or not the bridge crane could actually carry the mass of two of these sections, or the mass of one of these sections. I think it probably could. So I'm not sure if this is going to be how they do it in the future. They would probably use the bridge crane after today once that's fully installed, but we'll have to wait and see how that plays out.
Thanks to Javier, who says, just renewed membership. Love what you guys do. Please never stop. We won't, but I feel some days we wish we would because you have a break. Been watching you since the Mark 1 pop. Wow, you have been a long-term tank watcher, but very much appreciate your support and your long duration support as well. It is fascinating times, but you've been here from the start, so that's great. I am going to put a tweet into the chat because Mary is on site and she's just taking a little clip of it, of the actual raising on BN1. So that is going to chat now. There we go. So you can all follow that. And I'm sure most of the people in here who follow everything that's going on in Boca Chica are already following Mary. She has 120,000 followers on Twitter, which is amazing for a single subject person to get for just, for covering this. 120,000 followers. I've been doing this years, and I have got 146,000 followers. Mary's going to overtake me this year. And I, for one, will not be upset by that because she deserves it. I do believe I've got the clearance level, haven't I? Getting there to the point where they could swing over the other side. So that's a job. Look at that lift with those. I think it's 3 workers inside. The size of the high bay is something to appreciate. So they are way up high, and that is some kind of like job you got there. I think they're probably trying to steady it. It's not swaying as much. This might take a little while for it to dampen out its sway before they'll consider moving across the bottom tankage across. But we should see mating within the hour, I reckon. Sebastian, there's no questions here. Just people just throwing money at it. It's very much appreciated. Love you guys. Here's $5 for SLS and $5 for Super Heavy. I think that's best of both worlds there. Very much appreciated there.
You can see they now have that booster just above the lower section. So the lower section is the methane section. The upper section in the air right now is the liquid oxygen section, which is the opposite of the orientation on Starship. But hopefully we will find out how they're going to line these two things up, whether it's the bottom section being moved under or the top section being moved over. Look at that from this camera, Chris. That is an impressive sight to see.
Ooh. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why to build a high bay that high.
It does look like chat is catching this. The CH4 stack, the methane stack on the bottom, is being slid over to the right.
Wow.
So it looks like they do have it on the roll lifts, and that makes sense because, as I mentioned, the hole in the high bay roof is not very tall, or not very wide, so not a lot of space to maneuver that crane.
And I just went quiet while I was taking a clip of that because I don't like to tweet clips of my voice on it. I'm just not that vain. Let's just read some of the questions here. We got, do we know how many Raptors BN1 will have? It initially was coin to wheel on 2 Raptors for a 150 meter hop, but we did see the thrust poke for BN1, and it had 4 vent holes, which you see the tri-venting coming from during the actual Starship test. So we believe it might have 4. Again, BN1, we're not expecting to fly. We're expecting it to be for ground testing, for a static fire, maybe. So if you do install Raptors on it, I don't think we'll see many. We'll just get enough data from the firing to test out the ground support equipment and the actual tankage itself. The question will be for BN2 and indeed BN3. How many Raptors we'll need for that? That is the big question. I have no answer for that at all. We don't know. I think we'll be looking out for the thrust poke and getting some ideas from the vents, seeing any indications of how many Raptors will need for it. But the big question is they don't want to lose Raptors during testing. So these are expensive units, these expensive engines. They would rather go for the minimum amount, just if the case they do lose a booster, that they won't lose that many Raptors in the process. We don't know the answer, but we'll keep an eye on it.
You can see they're making progress getting those 2 sections of the Super Heavy booster connected or lined up, but I mean, the height of that thing is just ridiculous, Chris. Imagine that with a Starship on top. I mean, the Starship itself is about 50 meters tall. So
Well,
then you
we've
have,
seen from renders, haven't we? We've seen the renders there. It's bigger than a Saturn V. And I know a lot of people don't appreciate how tall the Saturn V was, but in a lot of photographs where you get the human to scale, that was a monster rocket, and this is going to be even taller.
yeah, the total stack height on the SpaceX website is 120 meters. The exact super heavy stack has been adjusting slightly with its design. There's been landing legs, there's been no landing legs. So I'm not quite sure what the exact meter to the meter height is going to be, but approximately 120 meters tall for the super heavy booster plus the Starship on top.
A lot of that sway is now dampened out, so I think we're on target. Just keep moving it across, and they'll have the guides. So any oscillation, any kind of swaying, even if it's just minor, that'll be dampened out as soon as I get to the point of guiding it in. In fact, it might come in handy because many times I've seen them put nose cones on. They've had to get crowbars out because it's just not aligned properly. The swaying might help a little bit.
And a couple more questions in our chat. Let's see. Durrell asks, what is your favorite shuttle launch and why is it SCS-100? Was that for you or the other Chris?
It might be for both of us. I always recall SCS-112 because it's Atlantis, and that was the first real live NASA TV coverage of a shuttle launch that you could watch without being on TV. You could watch on the internet. It was terrible feed. It was literally like 360 at the most, I think, if that. And it was just something where you could follow along properly, but it also had the first launch of the rocket cam. So they were showing it. Rob Davis commentating, I remember distinctly. And it was a rocket cam view from the external tank pointing down towards the shuttle. And it was just surreal. They lost the camera after about 2.5 minutes of ascent, but it was beautiful. You could see the roll program with Space Coast Florida rolling away and the arc towards orbit. Oh, it was just something that if you were watching that and you weren't into rockets or anything like that, you probably would have been converted during that launch. So that is a special place for me. But as far as historic missions go, STS-125, that servicing mission to Hubble after Columbia with no ISS safe haven, using Atlantis on the opposite pad as STS-400 launch on need rescue support. That was back to the old days of NASA, you know, seat of the pants kind of like actions where they had approved something that most of the time they would never have got approval for. But because it was Hubble, it was the last chance to save Hubble, they went for it and it worked perfectly. Wonderful mission. And that was Atlantis as well.
Let's see. We have a lot of super chats that we missed because there's been so much action today, but I will try to get a couple more. Taylor, thank you for the membership. I would just actually go through all the memberships. So Javier as well, Shaquille, Mark, JJ831. We had Taylor, and then I think that catches us up. So thank you all for the new memberships. It looks like the super heavy booster is now fairly close to being lined up there. Aiden says, good job, Orange Rocket.
Yep.
Super with a go, NASA. Nick says, I'm sure this has been said, but I would love to see a long-term static fire of 21 Raptors on a BN puck. Yes. A hot fire full duration of a super heavy would be quite a sight to see. I'm not sure the test stand is going to be able to handle that, though, especially without a flame diverter.
They might be replacing windows in Boca Chica Village as well.
That is very true. Thomas says, NASA finishes green run hot fire test. SpaceX, hold my beer. Well, I mean, I think if it was a super heavy hot fire or a launch, that would be true, but
yeah,
this is just a stacking.
And it is coincidence. Some people in chat were saying, oh, SpaceX is doing this on purpose to take some of the limelight off SLS. No way. It's just coincidence. They were waiting for this for a long time in the planning, so it's just the way Boca Chica works. When they're ready, they'll go, and it just happened to time today, and right after SLS.
You can see there that is almost the spectacular visual of the full Super Heavy booster we're about to see. It's going to be ridiculous when that thing rolls down Highway 4. I mean, that was another question. That was another big question, Chris, we had for months, is people were wondering, how are they going to roll out the first Super Heavy booster?
Yeah.
Would they roll out, the two halves separately so that it was not so tall when they're rolling it down the highway? But, I mean, I don't think they're going to flip it horizontal, so I'm assuming that we may see a full stack Super Heavy booster roll down Highway 4 to the launch site in a vertical configuration, which is going to look absolutely absurd.
Checking the wind conditions that day.
Yeah, that is for sure. I wonder what the wind conditions are going to be for lifting this thing onto the launch stand as well.
If all goes to plan, and Elon's kind of like, he's been confirming along the way, indirectly, with the plans for this orbital launch, well, again, I'll say this summer, but that's still optimistic, and you've got to appreciate the fact that these targets are always very much Elon's drive, and then they don't achieve that date, but they'll achieve it faster than if he didn't have that drive. So there's a method behind the madness, shall we say. But this year, there's a good chance this year we will see a full stack Starship Super Heavy vehicle launch. And I find that surreal. That is something else. That when that thing launches, I wonder what the reaction will be from people who have not taken any interest in this so far. Because this big silver rocket is visually beautiful. It really is. Compared to some other rockets that launch, their launches look great, but the rockets themselves don't look at all impressive. This rocket looks impressive. And I think the amount of interest that it will build and also benefit from will be something else.
For sure. Couple more chat messages and super chats. Rob and Frodo with 2 more memberships to add to the list. Musical Wolves says, does SpaceX have to increase the height of the high bay? That's a good... I mean, I don't think we've seen the height of the high bay change.
I think if anything, they'll want another one, won't they? But I think
they're gonna need more than one high bay. I think that's for sure. Potentially a super heavy, or not a super heavy, a super high bay that's a lot bigger with more volume for stacking. But I don't think this single, the super high bay is going to be needed to cope with a increased production cadence as they move towards the production version of the vehicle. But I'm not sure if they're actually going to call it the super high bay, but that is what I would call it.
Seen in the aerial photos, like RGB, I'll keep mentioning because he does take the aerial photographs. They have a lot of space there, but it's mainly used for car parking. That's the ironic thing about this, is their production cadence is so fast and so high that they need the workforce to cater for that. So the space you do see where you think they could build another facility is mostly lit up by cars. It's because they've got that many workers there. And we've seen in the plans for the expansion of the orbital and the suborbital launch pads down the road of Highway 4, that one space is allocated towards another car park. So that just gives you an indication of how many people work there and how much space they've got to allocate to make sure the workforce can park up and then get to work on these big silver rockets.
And it looks like the preliminary statements being put out from both NASA and Boeing are that the core stage hot fire test for SLS went very well, so we'll wait for the press briefing to hopefully get some more data, but all indications currently are that the SLS core stage performed very well. And let's see some more questions.
Just going to put another tweet. Sorry, I'm going to
go ahead.
I've interrupted you for once. We've got another tweet from Mary, and that picture is one of the scale things. Well, I'm going to put it into chat now. It just shows the scale because we've got some cars in view, so you can see the cars, you can see the crane, you can see people on the crane, and that just shows it's using the full height of the high bay just to stack this booster. So when this thing rolls out, My word, I think they'll have to clear the roads and people around it. There will be no Austin shot from his feet showing us rolling by. I think they'll be pushing people back for this one.
Yep, and a couple more questions. Is this the final stacking of BN1? I think so, Chris, right?
Yeah, I really do. I mean, this is what they're doing. This is the cadence. Again, this is what we're talking about. People will say, oh, fair enough, you've got this date and it doesn't make any sense. It seems too soon. You do agree with it because that's how they work. They always work on that kind of like accelerated timeline. But then they're going to achieve it. So what can you say? I mean, this is what we're seeing. We're seeing the first super heavy booster being stacked, and it'll be rolled out after SN11 in a matter of weeks. It's just where they are. This is how fast they go, and they have the cadence to do that because, unlike SLS, they haven't got the next one a year away from being tested. The next Starship is in the mid-bay, SM15. The next super heavy, BN2, their rings and sections are outside waiting to be stacked. That's how fast they go. So they can afford to do this at this pace of testing and afford the losses and gain the data from that, which will benefit them in the long run, and just fly again. Test, fly, fail, repeat. Fix, file, repeat. It's amazing, really. It's for a facility that isn't that massive compared to some facilities for rocket companies. They do go through a lot of vehicles at some pace.
Brett says, all hail Mary and Jack. I totally 100% agree with you.
I agree with that too.
These robot feeds would not be possible without the hard work from both Mary and Jack getting them set up and managed for us. And of course, Mary will have spectacular footage. She's down there getting some footage for the daily video, so stay tuned for that. We're going to have some awesome footage of this stacking operation in our daily video. Have we seen a thrust puck that can hold the full complement of Raptors for BN1? BN1 is only going to have a couple of Raptors, Chris, so I think the current thrust puck can handle it.
Yeah, it's 2 or 4. That's what we've come to the conclusion. We don't know for sure. Elon said 2, but that was before SN8, so plans change all the time. That was a long time ago. Jack took a photograph of the thrust puck for BN1. It had BN1 label on it, and it had 4 vent holes, which suggested it's going to have 4 Raptors. That would make a lot of sense to me. They could do ground testing with 4 Raptors, get a lot of data. They're not going to hopefully not going to lose the vehicle. I mean, we've gone quite a period since the last pop and splosh and explosion on the actual landing pad on the test mount. So I think they can test it and keep the Raptors intact in one go via that testing. So yeah, I can't see any need for more than 4. I think that's what it'll be. I think 4. I'm going to put my money on 4.
Yep. Yeah, it's always plans can change. Sometimes people hear one thing and it turns out not to be true, and then they think the information was originally wrong. No, this is Boca Chica. SpaceX changes course every single week, so
that's a really good point to bring up, Michael.
It's going to be BN4. Who knows?
Yeah, the thing is, you see, when we report things, it's accurate. Trust me, we don't write articles on stuff we're guessing. That's for the forum. That's for people to discuss. That's chat. When we do news articles, that's based on information we believe is verified, and we're confident with it. We put it on the site. The problem is, with the pace where Boca Chica changes and Elon's plans change, that could be outdated information before too long. Doesn't mean the information was wrong at the time. It's just the way they work. It's just the way. It's like that with a lot of programs, to be fair. But with Boca Chica, it changes by the week.
You can see they now have those 2 sections of BN1 pretty much lined up, so hopefully we will see them lower the top section. But I'm going to say it again. I know I said it twice already, but this looks totally insane from this camera angle. We need like full-scale models of all the other operational orbital rockets out there in Boca Chica, so you can get a sense of scale, just how much bigger this thing is going to be.
Let's ask Northrop Grumman if they want to roll out an Antares down to Boca Chica for a day.
Oh yeah. But even a Falcon 9 is 70 meters tall, so That's just slightly taller. Well, not slightly, but 20 meters taller than a Starship, and the Super Heavy booster is by itself taller than a Falcon 9. So incredibly, incredibly tall and massive vehicle.
I feel awfully bad. I'm tweeting quite a lot of Boca Chica clips and videos and images just an hour after a successful SLS test. We've tweeted everything about SLS, about 10 tweets. It's not like we've ignored it. But at the time of this is hilarious.
Actually, I don't know why I've not thought of this before, Chris, but if a Starship is 50 meters tall and the entire stack is 120 meters, that makes the Super Heavy booster's portion approximately 70 meters, which means it's actually about equivalent to a Falcon 9 in height. So, essentially, the first stage of Super Heavy, or the first stage of the Starship Super Heavy system, is not only about the same height as the Falcon 9 booster, but it's also has a much, much larger diameter. So, the performance of this vehicle is going to be a whole another level. More questions in chat. Ralph, thank you again for the super chat. CPL Daywalker, a big supporter of the stream, says, what were the operational temps engines? I'm not sure I know that answer off the top, Chris.
Can you repeat it?
What
were tweet check it.
We're going to have to go with 3.
Yeah.
Thank you for the super chat. Is this compared to SLS? What's the... At least Block 1 SLS.
T3, I think. I'll check that. We've got F. Looks alright to me.
That's a lot of Fs. Not us this time. I'm checking it. I think we lost it. Some people are saying... Yeah, that was not us. I promise I did not press any buttons that time. That was YouTube. But I'm not sure we're back. Some people say we're back, some people say we're not back.
Right, showing back for me, so I'm going to keep talking while it looks like it's back for me. I think a lot of people might be on like a few minutes delay, where it's just basically not caught up to live.
Okay, yeah, I promise, chat. I see we're back now. The first time was 100% my fault. This time was just YouTube decided it was not going to have a good day, but I was not pressing any buttons.
Also, I'll tell you one thing. As someone who's not into this and broadcasting, it's a lot of effort to get this thing working. So it's, you've got to understand how much expertise goes behind all this incredible amount.
Okay.
Right, we've turned it on.
So YouTube still doesn't. Let me know if you see it.
We can't fix it within a minute or so. We end it. pretty much everyone's gone anyway.
So we'll come back if we can fix it. Okay, I think we might be back. I have moved us over to a backup system because YouTube seemed to have a major freakout. I don't know what happened. We have not seen that happen before. That did not look to be on our end. Everything was looking good on our server. Even on the YouTube interface, it said we were still live. But clearly there were problems on YouTube's end, so I swapped this over to the backup system that YouTube provides, and it seems like the backup system has fixed the problem. So next time this happens, I know exactly what to do, but it does look like that was on YouTube's end, so sorry about that, but we are back, and as you can see, there's actually not that much change since we were last live. Still waiting for that final stacking.
There's a rumor that Senator Shelby was interning at YouTube today.
That is a good rumor.
Now we know what's going to happen now because we've got experience of them stacking things in the high bay. They'll be learning it very, very slowly. I mean, super slowly. It's a skill. The crane driver, we actually got a clip of a lift with a crane driver when Jack was filming, and he managed to get the audio from the cab to the other workers over the what was like radio mics, and the amount of communication that's involved is amazing. Really, I had no idea about crane driving or hoisting anything, and that's what they'll be doing now. They'll be taking it extremely slowly down over the guides, and then they will literally just stack it that way. And you can see, oh, look at that! You can see them. They're actually literally moving it by hand now. So I think they will be literally lowering it centimeter, inch by inch. And that sway, it's not much sway at all, but they can literally do it by hand. And they will use like crowbars to literally just prise it in. And that's when we'll have a stack. Delete that pin message, we'll need that. There we go. I find this amazing. There's a lot of dynamics involved here. This is a huge crane, a huge tankage on the Super Heavy, and they're lowering it down as carefully as they can. For the first time ever, it's the first time they've ever done this operation. And it's before they were using a bridge crane. The bridge crane was, as you saw in Mary's video last night, delivered, but it's not been installed yet. So this might be the only time they'll do this in this way for a Super Heavy boost stacking. In the future, they will use the bridge crane, which will reside at the top of the high bay, and lower it down via that, and that'll have a lot less sway dynamics involved. Just from the nature of it being more of support. They'll use a different support structure from the support ring that they used to lower this thing down with.
People are saying they're seeing a drone. I'm trying to see if I can see it myself, but would not surprise me if SpaceX is trying to get some awesome
yeah.
video and photos of this exciting event.
There's actually a lot of drone footage they've not put out yet. They have for launches and stuff, but wow.
I bet we've seen about 0.00001% of all the drone footage they've captured so far.
There's a major highlight video coming up at some point soon. I know that for a fact, but I think the big key thing will be Elon's next big speech, which I think we're coming to the point now where we could probably start looking forward to one this year with the situation improving, where they can have like an outdoor event. And hopefully that overview will give us a lot of answers to a lot of questions that have been asked about the program's future. But also it might use a highlight, a sizzle reel, shall we say, of what's being done, and I guarantee you a lot of that will be drone footage. Question for Rough Riders Show. One of our regulars. Do you think they will keep Tankzilla, which is the crane? We've all got different names for it. Keep it in its current configuration, or put it back to the original configuration when it comes to stacking regular starships? That's a very good question. They did extend the crane with the reach, which obviously they needed, required for this super heavy stacking. But then SN 15 will be the next one they'll need it for, or even sooner, because let's face it, if SN 11 lands, they'll need to move it off the landing pad, and they'll need a crane for that. I don't know if they've got other cranes there which could provide that job, but this crane was used to lift it onto the mount. There's a very good chance that this crane will roll back to the launch site to pick up a successfully landed SN 11 and move it back onto the mount, or onto a roll lift to move it back to the production site. So it's a very good question. I don't know. I do know that it took them a day or so to put the extensions on, so I presume it'll take a day or so to take the extensions off. So it's not a big consideration as far as the timeline goes. But yeah, the answer to the question is, will they take the extensions off? Probably, yeah.
Yeah, and I forget what those welding things are called, but they have those sort of like spikes on the very top of the...
Yeah, I couldn't find it either.
of the CH4 tank to help line up the liquid oxygen tank on top. But let me know in chat what those are called.
Lead-ins.
I know. Lead-ins. There you go. Thank you. You have the lead-ins around the top of the tank.
Andy Law, thanks NASA Spaceflight for covering this, and at the same time the SLS successful green run and everything else you do. Appreciate that. We didn't have any idea that this was going to happen at the same time. It was an SLS feed. It was to cover the green run. And then BN1 says, I want a bit of the action here. I want a bit of the limelight. Here we are. Because Ben B also says, clicked on the SLS video and got the super heavy booster. Thanks for the stream. That's where we are these days, by the way. That's what happened. You can never have one day where just one thing is happening. There is multiple things happening. I remember the days where it was one article a day on Shuttle, and it was a processing report for a launch 3 months away. And that was your day. You could spend... That's what I did. I came home from work, spent about an hour or so on an article, maybe an hour on the forum, and that was it. That was all. Had all the work involved with the site. Now it's every spare hour I've got, and I can say that for the same for everybody else in the team. It is non-stop. There is not enough hours in the day, literally. Fred, new member, thank you very much. By the way, I do appreciate everyone's putting money. We do appreciate, because this operation costs a lot of money to all these robot cameras. We're sending Brady and Philip out to Stennis for the green run. It's a lot of money involved, trust me. So everything that comes in sport-wise is very much appreciated. I like it when Jack is on the stream, because when Jack says thanks for the super chats and the donations and the memberships, he really says it as I like to mean it, but my Yorkshireness doesn't allow for me to get too emotional about it. So, but we do appreciate it. We need Jack to come on down again and say, "Really, thank you all for your support. It means a lot," because it does, and we mean it. There's nothing insincere about that. Patrick Stewart, again, a regular. Soros, let's take a break. Soros, super heavy, left early. Yeah, there's so much going on. Let's go some questions here. A question for Lunar Starship. Where will the docking port be for docking with the gateway? It'd be like a PMA situation. It's an IDA situation. It's like an adapter that can work for several vehicles. That's what they need. It works on the space station really well. PMA, the pressurized mated adapters, things like that. They will use that experience from ISS and literally transfer it onto the gateway, where it'll be able to have multiple vehicles docking to the same port. That's the key. Always has been, and that's how it's worked for the ISS. It'll work forward for the gateway. I think the question might be for me to ask is how many ports do all need? I would hope they have 2. I mean, obviously it'll start with 1. That's the initial build-up of the gateway. But I hope they eventually have 2, because that will give them more redundancy and more ability to bring more to the actual gateway and make it viable as an orbital lunar station. Because I do like the gateway. I think the gateway is a great idea. I think it's a lovely stopping off point for what will be an economy which we're based on the moon to then go to Mars, because I think with this stepping stone approach of Moon, Mars and beyond, as much as this constellation saying, was a viable one. I think it makes more sense. the fact that we learned so much from the ISS 200 miles up says a lot, because we have learned a lot. We're still learning a lot. And I think we can learn a lot from being on the moon. Jumping straight to Mars is risky, to say the least. So having those stepping stones makes a lot of sense, and the gateway is part of that.
You can actually see there's people inside the top of the methane tank section helping to align this booster. So you see that the
How
lift
are they going to get out?
people, but there is a crowd of crew members inside the Super Heavy booster right now.
The regular one person today who asks, are we a NASA? No, we're not NASA. We're NASAspaceflight.com. It's a site. Trust me, you can't get us confused with NASA.gov. If you thought my voice was someone you'd hear on NASA TV, you have not heard a lot of NASA TV.
How do they connect the two sections of the booster? They weld them together. BN1 in a high bay is looking like SN5 and SN6 in a trench coat. Yes, it's basically just a taller version of the Starship tank section, but with the liquid oxygen tank on top of the, or the other way around, the liquid oxygen tank on top of the methane tank, as opposed to Starship, which has the methane tank below. So the orientation of the tank sections are reversed on Super Heavy for whatever reason.
Sorry, can I just... Stephen Cook, Chris, how do you feel about Harrogate being in the league? You're keeping me up late. Yeah, well done to Harrogate. Well-run club. They shouldn't be above York in the league structure, but all the best to them. We played them away a few seasons ago. They were a lovely club to face, so yeah, all the best to them. Go on, Michael, sorry.
Why is Super Heavy in two pieces? I thought Super Heavy was one piece and Starship would just sit on top. The reason is that Super Heavy is still being built, so this is not the final Super Heavy. The final Super Heavy will be one piece. They are just assembling the Super Heavy booster right now. Thomas says, when the first orbital Starship launches, how insane do you think the crowds will be, and will you all be there assuming it's safe? You can rest assured that when the first orbital Starship launches, I will do everything in my power to be there. I don't know how close you'll be able to get, but I presume from South Padre Island you will be able to watch the launch from, because I don't think they're going to be able to close the entire island down. So yes, I will definitely try to be there. I don't know about you, Chris.
I've always said I want to see one launch from Florida. Obviously, I'm going to go visit Boca Chica at some point. There's no question about it. But I have a kind of fascination with wanting to see a Super Heavy Starship launch from 39A. I don't know if that's ever going to still be the plan, or if they're going to just launch like Starships and go for different kind of missions or whatever like that. But I do believe that the iconicness of 39A and seeing a Saturn V class vehicle launching from there again would blow my mind, and I would love to see that. So the answer to the question is yes, both. I don't know when I'll get to Boca Chica. I mean, this is a different situation this year and last year, to just start saying, hey, I'll pack my bags and go to America for a bit. Hopefully, by the time that becomes a consideration allowance, we'll be in a situation where we're seeing Super Heavy boosters launching quite a lot. So I'm looking forward to that.
More questions. When will when will SN11 fly? We're not sure yet, but probably next week. I don't think it's happening this week, given that we have not seen a static fire yet. And in fact, Chris, I don't think there's any road closures scheduled for tomorrow. So.
Oh, well, there we go.
Seems
and
like
Mary's not had a notice either.
No,
she's had notices before where they've cancelled it, but she's not even had the notices yet, so that's quite a while off yet.
So anyway, it sounds like the static fire could be slipping into next week. So perhaps the test flight would be in the second half of the week. We'll see how it plays out. Any idea what those studs on the high bay are for? I'm not quite sure. You're probably talking about the braces around the outside. I think that's to prevent it from essentially bending too much. It's kind of to prevent the walls of the high bay from sort of caving in and caving out, if that makes sense.
And also, just to answer some questions, replying to your previous answer, the static fire they did conduct earlier in the week, that was not good enough. That was not a static fire test. That was an aborted test. So they do need to do it again.
Yes, so we expect another static fire before the hub. Some people have been saying maybe the first one was good enough. I can tell you that was not good enough, and SpaceX still plans to attempt another one. I guess you never know. Maybe Elon says this is taking too long, we're just going to go for it, but as of now, the plan is definitely to have another static fire test. Is the welding for super heavy by people or machines? I think we have seen some robots out there, Chris, but
yeah,
at least
some German machines.
Yeah, the stacking of the stacking of the two sections together, though, will be done by humans, I think. I don't think they're going to be getting robots up that high.
That's true, yeah. But inside the big tents, we've seen the robotic welders. In fact, in the video from last night from Mary, we showed some of the robotic welders in action. They arrived on the truck about 4 or 5 months ago from Germany. And I think they're going to buy some different welders in at some point. I think those welders they've got right now are like a stopgap measure. But they're working out quite well. Like I say, we've not had any pops or splashes, at least not test tank wise or anything like that, since then. So whatever they're doing to weld them, they've got the weld sorted, because in the early days the welds were a problem. So that's now fixed.
And if you're just joining us, that is the wide-angle shot of what is going on in the high bay to give you some context. But from what I'm seeing in chat, it sounds like this close-up camera is the most popular view right now as we watch the two super heavy sections get aligned, so we will stay on this tight camera.
Northrop Grumman has tweeted, ready to support NASA SLS, the only exploration class rocket capable of carrying humans to the moon and into deep space. And then he goes, for Artemis. Wow.
See, I never understand that.
It's just...
Wow. A man, a plan, a canal, and a
What is going on, Chris?
I don't think that's me. Or is it?
That was definitely you.
Something set off my phone's Siri then.
But
I think my phone was shocked by Northrop's statement there.
I just don't understand what the benefit is of doing that, because all you do is entice all the SpaceX fans to go and reply to that. You just know how that works. So, I mean, you're kind of asking for it when you tweet something like that. I don't really see the point, but that's what they tweeted. Evan says they have to weld from inside after stacking. I think so. I'm not positive. Maybe we will see some welding on the outside, but right now, at least, to line it up, the crews are inside of the methane tank. Green run and super heavy stacking in one morning. What more could I ask for? Says Flex. Flashy83, thank you for the membership. Nick says once the crane is installed, why not just build boosters bottom to top in one go instead of stacking to halves? I'm not exactly sure. Perhaps it's faster to build them in two separate stacks, because you can only stack one piece at a time when you're working on one stack. But when you're working on two stacks, you can stack one piece at a time on two stacks, on two different stacks, which is equivalent to two additional sections being stacked at once. So it might be faster to split up the work into two different stacks, if that makes sense. But it looks like they are finally lowering the liquid oxygen tank some more, and we are seeing maybe a foot or two away from a completed super heavy stack minus the welding.
So Joe asks, when will they be attaching a Robert Reliant? That is if you don't understand that reference, that is a reference to Top Gear, where they launched a Robert Reliant as a space shuttle. Quite successfully until it didn't land properly, shall we say. But
they were both bricks.
Yeah, Well, let's be cruel. The thing I would ask in relation to that question is, what will they use the mass simulator? Because I'm thinking they will use a mass simulator at some point.
Maybe a Reliant Robin filled with lead.
It's going to be something Tesla, isn't it? It's going to be a Cybertruck or something like that. Probably a Tesla Semi.
You can see them now spinning the liquid oxygen tank slightly as they get it lined up.
Taco guy asks Chris B, would you fly to the US to see Artemis 1 fly, assuming the day that ever comes? Oh my. Would you ever come for a later launch? I'd love to see Artemis 1 launch. The thing with me is I think I'd be far too busy kind of controlling the site and making sure the site stays up and things like that. So, but that's the thing that you pay, the price you pay when you do this is that you can't just sit back and watch launches like the rest of you guys. You've got to do the production of it. You got to do the content for it. You got to do the presentation of it. There's so much involved. Write the articles. It's one of those things where you can't really sit back and enjoy it until after it's happened. So going over to launches is not all that much viable unless you've got other people doing the job you're doing. But that's what we do. We're trying to build a team. So, but it's a lot of work. Yeah, I would love to see it launched there. I'd love to see SLS launch Artemis 1.
And they're continuing to roll that upper stack, it looks like.
How are they going to get the people out from outside inside?
I think there's an access hatch on
right.
The lower tank, yeah. That would be bad if there was not an access hatch.
Well, I was thinking to get out at the top of the bottom, but I was wondering if they had a big ladder. I didn't realize they had access doors halfway through, so that's all right. But the other thought was maybe there's a mock-up of an internal mock-up where they could just test out staying there until they get to the pad. Let's put the HLS nose cone on top.
Did you apply for Dear Moon, Chris?
No, I didn't, no, because I don't think there's any chance. I've never won anything in my life. I've never got more than 2 numbers in the lottery. I'm not going to win that. There's no point. Not for the sake of them giving my photo ID.
Tony says, thanks you guys. You always have the right mixture of information, analysis, history, and laughs. Thank you so much. And thank you, Mary. Well, thank you, Tony, for the kind words. Janjanut says, will BN1 be tested from the suborbital test stand, same as Starship, or will they have one of the new pads ready by then? I'm not positive, but I think it will be tested on test stand A, which is the same test stand that Starship SN10 and Starship SN8 flew from, along with SN5 and 6. So perhaps the pad B will be where SN15, which is the next Starship, goes to. I'm not positive, but that seems like it's the way it's going. The orbital on site, which will be the permanent home of Super Heavy, is still under construction, so I don't think that's going to be quite ready in time. But after BN1, I'm not sure if BN2 will have the orbital test stand ready in time or the orbital launch site ready in time, but definitely in the future, Super Heavy will be moving over to the orbital launch pad, but the suborbital test stands will act as an interim solution. Pat says, what is the thinking? How will they get the Starship on top of this monster? Well, they will have a permanent crane they're building on top of the launch tower at the orbital launch pad, but for the first orbital launch, I'm not sure if that will be ready in time, Chris.
No, I don't think so. I think the way they're going, the way they're proceeding with the orbital launch site, it's impressive. But they want that big integration tower, which will be taller than the high bay, for context. They want that built there, so that's a long way off. But I think they're going to start building that. It's going to start rising out of the ground within a week or so, apparently. So that'll be amazing to watch.
Steven says I meant to do that as a super chat. Here's a few quid. Well, we try to get as many questions as we can from the normal chat as well. So no worries there, Steven. Matthew says, do we know how Super Heavy will land? No. Elon said they might try to catch it with the orbital launch tower, but I still think there might be landing legs to start with. We will see how that plays out. But the second half of your question was Falcon retro thrust or Starship belly flop. Definitely a vertical propulsive landing like Falcon 9 for Super Heavy. So that's why they don't have aero surfaces on Super Heavy. Aero says the tank order is so they can keep the center of pressure on the vehicle, or keep the, excuse me, I read your question wrong. The tank order is so they can keep the center of mass behind the center of pressure on the vehicle. They use the different densities of the LOX and liquid methane, and I think you're correct. That makes a lot of sense because if you know how the propellant ratios work, I think it's 70-something% is liquid oxygen and the rest is obviously methane. So a lot more liquid oxygen than methane, essentially. So if you want to, manage your center of mass and center of pressure, you can take that into consideration. Ron, thank you for the membership. Dan says the access hatches are called manways in the biz. Apparently, thanks for all you do. I did not know that. Thank you for the super chat. Communist Bugs Bunny says best wishes from the other side of the world.
What a username.
Yeah. Future Martian says it's absolutely insane how massive Super Heavy is. I could not agree more. If we go out to our wide shot quickly, you can see that. A very tall booster, and it's going to be quite a sight to see when this thing rolls out. So many super chats. I'm doing my best to keep up. BN1 and SN11 on the pad at the same time, says Justin. I think SN11 is hopefully going to fly before that, but perhaps we may see SN15 at the pad. Chris, what are your predictions? SN15 on the pad with BN1?
Yeah, I think that's possible. I think the way the timeline works, we will see those two on the pad at the same time, and that'd be amazing. Because then we could literally do photoshops, can't we? We could literally Photoshop what a full stack would look like.
Let's see. How far along is SN15? The tank section of SN15 is fully stacked, but SN15 has not been stacked with a nose cone yet. And if you're wondering why that is, I think you're looking at the answer right now. The high bay is currently being used to stack BN1, and when they had those two stacks separated, I think they needed all the space that they had to do the stacking. But now that Super Heavy DN1 is stacked, we may see Starship SN15 move into the high bay to get its nose cone stacked. You think that's accurate, Chris?
I do.
Cool. But, I mean, it looks like we're at a foot, maybe less than a foot from the stacking being completed here. That is quite exciting. Down to inches now. Make sure nobody's fingers are in the way, I guess. Frodo says, gotta love how SpaceX keeps building bigger and bigger grain silos.
Yeah.
Kenneth, hi all, great work. Which Raptor engines are being optimized for Mars takeoff and landing, vacuum, or Earth's sea level? I think they will use, well, they at least have to use the sea level engines to some degree because those are the only engines that can gimbal. The vacuum engines are fixed, so I'm not sure if the vacuum engines will be used as a complement at all during the Mars landing and launch procedures, but I expect them to mostly use the sea level engines since those have the gimbal capability. How would they transport BN1 safely to the launch pad without it tipping over during transport? Asks Chris. I think they're gonna do it the same way they move Starship. Chris, any ideas?
Yeah. Well, we saw that double row lift, didn't we? That device where they had like a mount in the middle of two of them. And I do believe that is capable of providing the support. They have done some road work as well on Highway 4 over recent months, which will mean that bend, which I think is going to be the most challenging part of this rollout, that bend has the width that will allow to take the weight and keep everything stable and level and without it tippling over, shall we say. I find the most fascinating part of this going up the ramp at the launch site where they go past Hopper, because that is quite an incline. So seeing that part of it will require all the levering devices they've got, all the hydraulic levering or levering, it depends where you're from, to allow to keep the thing really without the risk of it tippling. So I'm sure they've planned this. I'm sure they've worked it out and they've got the plan sorted and they know what they're doing. So it will look surreal to us, and I think it'll be fascinating to watch, especially live.
I keep trying to look at the question queue and then look back because I'm not sure if it's going to be 10 minutes until we see this final gap close or if it's going to happen while I'm reading somebody's question. But TNT asks, when do you think they will start reusing fully functional starships and or boosters? Any thoughts, Chris?
No, I don't know. It's hard to tell because in some ways they've got a way to go, and in some ways they're way ahead of schedule. Because the way Starship's test program has worked is they've had so many wins with the launch, the long duration firing the Raptors during ascent, the flip at the top, and then the belly flop landing, which was key because there was every chance it wouldn't have worked. The aero service is working. The flip on several of the landings have worked perfectly well. The landing burn almost worked well on SN10. They are far ahead of where you may have expected to be. I don't think they ever expected to land one and have it land on a landing pad and sat there happily after one or two launches. I think they want it to happen on SN11 though. And then SN15 will take the program further. Then you got the super heavy testing. That's all this year. To get to the point where they're starting to reuse them and then getting to the next big milestone of refilling, maybe we're talking in years again now rather than months. So I would say take one step at a time. They need to get the landing right first. They need to test super heavy first. They need to get that launching first. A full stack launch to orbit first. And then for them to successfully land from that first. And then we'll be talking about the repeating launches and the reusability and the next big phase, which is refilling.
I think that I'm trying to rewind the stream a couple minutes to see, but that gap has been closing very slowly. So I think we might be moments away from having a complete stack. Of course, they will still have to weld the two stacks together, but from a visual standpoint, it will be a complete stack.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Jack.
Hey, Jack.
I'm here watching this thing get stacked, and I knew we knew it was going to be big, but it's stupid big. It's just insane. That's all. I don't have anything smart to add. I just wanted to comment on how large it is. It's insane.
Because we're watching through cameras, and cameras are always quite deceptive, even though it's obvious it's huge. But seeing it in person, I mean, you'll get all the scale. You'll properly get the scale of the people, the cars, and the buildings. And for you to say that just proves the point. It is ridiculously big.
It's absolutely surreal. I mean, it's just to imagine this thing rolling down the highway on a modular transporter. Chris, it's gonna look so crazy. I can't even. And then of course, to see a full stack, to see a Starship atop one of these things, it's just gonna. I've never seen a rocket so big because there hasn't ever been one. Not even the Saturn V. This is just utter insanity. It's so cool to see the first one of these finally stacked.
Yeah, Jack's audio should be better now. I was not expecting Jack to jump in, but I have fixed it. Thanks for hopping on, Jack, because me and Chris have been talking our mouths off for quite a while waiting for this thing to stack, but I'm sure thing
Yeah,
in
sorry for the
person is
no
quite
warning.
impressive. No, you're welcome to jump on anytime, Jack. I will not complain. But
But
we
I
should
mean,
have that.
seriously, this is wild. I know I say everything is wild, but that's because a lot of wild stuff happens in Boca Chica, and this is yet another milestone in the development program, and a big one at that.
Let's see. Alan says hello from Scotland. Love all you guys do, and special shout out to Mary and Jack out in the field every day. Mary was on the daily video today, and Jack was also helping out with some special projects that we got going on. So lots and lots of work being put in by both Jack and Mary. So we appreciate your support and kind words towards them.
Yeah, and small teaser, that special project is super cool.
Stay tuned for our upcoming live streams. I mean, we don't want to promise anything, but it's not far away. Tyler says, so do the remains of the rods get melted down and made into new SN pieces? I'm not sure what they do with the scrap, Jack. Have you seen anything down there?
They have large dumpsters, which are like separate dumpsters from all the other ones, and they have scrap painted on the side of them. And I imagine all that stuff just gets taken to a scrapyard and melted down. I think in one of the recent daily videos, you could see that the steel storage area, and it's over by the Locks distillery, and there is a huge pile of stainless steel rolls that whenever they get a new roll delivered, they throw it over in that pile. And so all it is to say, I think they have plenty of raw stock on site for whenever they need another roll of steel. They don't need to like melt down the pieces of the previous starships and reconstitute them Terminator style or something into. I think all that stuff just goes to a scrapyard.
Fogley says super heavy is as tall as Falcon 9. I believe that is correct. Mike Smith says the fun will be watching BN1 roll down Highway 4. Are you looking forward to that, Jack?
Oh yeah, definitely looking forward to that. Assuming that I'm here, we'll see. We'll see how everything lines up, but hopefully I am here because that would be quite a sight to see.
And Chris, do we know if BN1 is made out of 3mm or 4mm thick 304L stainless steel, or is it the new 30X stainless steel they are developing?
Well, it's definitely a new 30X. We know that's a while away yet, the new alloy, which SpaceX is going to make themselves. I don't know if it's the 304L or which they're using the test tank as well. So it's a very good question. We don't know. I will try and find a way of finding out there because that is a good question. But by the way,
4, but I'm not positive.
By the way, Jack, who we just heard talking there, tweeted some photos. So I put the link in chat.
And chat is saying 4. So
yeah, 4 would make sense, honestly. If it, you have to think it's going to have to sustain the loads of a super heavy booster on top of it. So to go thinner on super heavy when they haven't even gone thinner on Starship yet seems a little bit premature.
Sorry, Jack. We're going to see some welding right there, I think. So.
No, you're good.
This might be about as far as they're going to go. I'm not quite sure how long it's going to be until they have got that gap filled in, either by welding or by lowering it. But
it'll completely fill in. Like they'll get the two pieces completely abutting each other, and then start welding. But to get that final fit just right, I mean, you don't want it to come down at any kind of angle, right? Because if you think about it, like imagine you're holding 2 cups or 2 cardboard tubes or something, and you're trying, like, if there's any kind of cant or angle on that top piece as you are trying to lower it on the second one, you're going to get contact on one side first, and that could buckle or damage the lower stack or the upper stack. You want contact to be around the entire ring simultaneously. And I'm obviously don't build starships for a living, but this is my intuition, right? Is you want it to come down completely in 100% level, so you don't get early contact on one side and then part of a ring or part of a stack taking all the weight and potentially being overstrained. So they take their time and they scoot it down little bit by little bit to make sure that everything comes in nice and level and perfectly all at once, rather than one side or the other, I think.
And look at that. I'm going to have to go back and do an A/B test, but we can see that welding continuing to move around a bit. I wonder what exactly they're welding right now if it's not fully flush. Maybe that part is better aligned. I'm not quite sure.
What are you thinking is the welding? That white light there on the left-hand side?
Yeah, it could just be a light, but it looks...
I think it's a light, honestly.
Really?
Yeah, because
yeah,
isn't
okay.
a welding
Chat
typically
says it's not welding. I might be wrong.
Yeah,
There was a light there
believe
earlier, so that's probably what it is. And that would make sense because it's not fully flush.
I've been looking at that, and it looks like somebody's connecting that side with the light.
Apparently that's been there for ages, so I apologize.
No worries.
If you rewind the stream like 5 minutes, you can see it doesn't look like much, but it has lowered a tiny bit more, I think, although it's really hard to tell. It's definitely going a lot slower than a Starship stack, or a Starship, I say that and now I'm second guessing myself, but I think when we saw the SN8 nose cone stack jack, it went a bit quicker. I could be wrong.
This seems about normal to me, but I am notoriously bad with estimating things like time and distance. But yeah, I mean, this is par for the course, and even if they're going a little bit slower, who cares? Because this is the first booster test, and do anything that would jeopardize this new piece of hardware. I mean, they're building booster number 2 already, and surely more than that, booster number 3, etc. But you don't want to damage it by rushing, so they're taking their time. And actually, hang on a second, I will be right back.
Notice he says congrats for the double strike. I'm assuming you mean the 2 awesome events we saw today. Nathan says this thing has got to roll out soon, right? It seems unlike SpaceX to gear up for a Starship launch without having a new one ready to go.
True.
Yep, there will be a booster on the test stand at Boca Chica shortly after SN11 flies. I think that is safe to say. Great coverage. I noticed recently on Mary's footage there were radiation warnings around the tank farm. What's that about?
We think from experts who are talking on the comment section, they were saying that's something they do with pipes of like ground support equipment, where they do a radiology test where it looks for kind of cracks in the pipage, and it ensures they are good to go and they won't leak. So they use
if you see,
go on, Jack.
If you see in some of the photos of like ring sections and barrel sections that Mary gets, like the really up close ones, where you can see the workers writing on the sections, a lot of times you'll see a stack of 3 individual abbreviations, and it's VT, Victor Tango, RT, God, I don't remember my NATO alphabet, whatever RT is, and then a third one, and I'm spacing out right now, but basically what those are is somebody signing off on various tests. And VT is a visual test, and RT I think is a radiological test, or maybe it's XT. Either way, it's X-rays. They're X-raying the pipes, and they typically will X-ray the welds on starships and on GSE plumbing to make sure that those welds are satisfactory. Because I mean, some of these things operate. I think we saw recently like a GSE panel above that section of the tank farm that was getting tested radiologically, and one of them said 200 bar and one of them said 400 bar, and so that's a significant amount of pressure. So you want to check those welds and make sure that they are properly done, and you don't have a void in there somewhere, so that you pressurize the system and then bang, something catastrophic happens. You don't want that. So I think I was also startled at first when I saw those radiation warning signs, But yeah, just X-rays. It's like no different than like a doctor's office or a dentist office or whatever where you get an X-ray. You got to wear a lead apron or just not be around there. I'm trying to remember what that
radiography.
There we go. That makes sense. I'm trying to think of what the three different tests are. It's a visual test, a radiography test, and maybe it's an ultrasound test. I don't know. I gotta go look at some of Mary's pictures now.
We're getting a lot of questions about will BN1 get legs and grid fins. I don't think so. I think it's just a pathfinder for a static fire test and obviously some cryogenic proof tests. So I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing it will not get a grid fin. It will not get grid fins and landing legs installed.
I don't know if it will get legs or not, but I think it is able to receive legs, if it's not getting them at least. I posted a really high-res photo the other day, and some people were looking at it, and they were like, are these legs? Is this a leg mount? So that's very wishy-washy, I know, but there might be legs on it. I'm not sure. Grid fins seems like no, definitely
not. Been out of the loop. What are the GSC tank sections? They are building GSC tanks for the orbital launch pad using the same tank construction they use for Starship. So some of the ring sections you've actually seen at the production site are for the orbital launch site ground support equipment tanks. They are not Super Heavy or Starship tanks. So that is what those are. Kaz says, knowing Elon, my bet is the total stack height for Super Heavy and Starship will be 128.016 meters, aka 420 feet. We'll see. That would not be surprising to me. Guilty says, how do they plan to produce fuel on Mars without a power plant there? As far as I know, a lot of energy is required to make LOX in CH4. Chris?
Sorry, I completely spaced out during the question. Do you repeat it for me?
How does SpaceX plan to make fuel on Mars?
It might actually be quite similar to what they're looking at the production site. They're looking to create their own propellant at Boca Chica, and I think you'd be looking at an ISRU, to call it, in situ resource utilization. I know I said it properly, where they can take what's on there on Mars and utilize it from the atmosphere and from the ground. Looking for water, looking for carbon dioxide, things like that. It's chemistry that I don't understand, but I know they can be done with ISRU.
Let's see. It looks like... Is it any closer? I don't think so. It's really hard to tell.
Yeah, at this point, it's just going to be pixels here and there. But I mean, that's how it goes. It's so massive, and you know they'll edge it together very closely. And I wonder if we'll see like another lift pop up, or this lift go down, or what when they get to that point. And, I mean, you think they're gonna weld this together by hand? That seems so wild.
It's interesting, Jack, because Starship, kind of, the proportions, it looks kind of fat compared to the other launch vehicles we see. The diameter is so large. But then when I go out wide to this wide shot, I mean, the Super Heavy booster looks pretty skinny when it's that tall.
Yeah, honestly, I have a confession. Trevor Mollman does the wide Starship memes every time they like roll one out or whatever. He's done a couple of them now, and I've watched those so many times that a normal Starship to me looks like pencil thin, like too skinny. Like there's been multiple times where I've taken a photo and then I've been editing it and I'm like, man, did I tweak the scale or something in the horizontal dimension and it's really thin for no. I'm just used to how wide Starship looks because of Trevor's videos. But yeah, it's going to be crazy to see this thing fully stacked and what that does to your visual interpretation of it, right? Like, you're right, it does look extremely thin compared to a Starship, the booster stack. So, I can't wait till they roll it out of the high bay and you can see it in all its glory.
Mel says, truly appreciate the coverage as always. It's been a cool day. I agree. Jared says, what have we seen? Have we seen the stage separation hardware? Do we know what scheme they will use, Chris?
We're talking about the color scheme?
The stage separation hardware.
Oh, right. Close. No, I have no idea.
Yep, I don't think we've seen that yet. I think maybe BN3. I mean, we reported that BN3 was going to be the first orbital booster, so perhaps that one would be outfitted with separation systems first, but we'll see how it goes. But I would guess some sort of pneumatic system. SpaceX is not a fan of explosive bullets because, one, you cannot test them easily beforehand, and two, for reusability, they are not something that is ideal because you have to obviously install new explosive bullets after you explode a current set. Let's see, more questions. Keep up the good stuff. Can't wait to see this launch. Do we know if the mass load capacity of suborbital stands is up to task of supporting a fully fueled Super Heavy, or will it be limited to partial fueling until the orbital stand is ready? Jack, I'm thinking only a partial propellant loading. What do you think?
Yeah, that would make sense. That's a really good question.
Yeah, good question. It seems like we might have a bit of robot noises, but Jack has been pretty stable so far, so hopefully that was a brief hiccup. But yeah, I'm guessing a partial fueling. Just found out the SLS core stage could fit inside the Super Heavy booster. Mind blown, says Chris. And Chris, when you checked the SLS height number, what was it for the total stack?
I didn't check it. Hang on. Keep talking. I'll come back to you.
The SLS Block 1 height is, I just got it, it's 322 feet tall.
I got 321.
Oh, they must have changed something. But it's approximately 98 meters, so the entire, both the Super Heavy and, well, both the Super Heavy and the Starship combined is 120, so the full Super Heavy Starship launch system is quite a bit taller than SLS. But SLS is still huge, obviously. I'm confused. This is an SLS question. I was confused why there's a test window for only 2 hours. I think that's just the approximate test window. Do we know, Chris, if that green run test window is a hard window or not?
Yeah, it was. It's local restrictions.
So you cannot be doing that kind of operation any time of day, I guess. Safety reasons.
Yep.
Because they have to secure the airspace and whatnot too. So there was a TFR filed for that.
If you watch we were talking about Top Gear earlier. If you watch Jeremy Clarkson's video on YouTube where they incorrectly titled it a solid rocket booster test, but it was an RS-25 test at Stennis. He opens it with, "And the locals are here. A sound that will wake the dead." It's like, because it is that noisy. So 4 of them. It does affect the local area, and they have a local. It's a bit like the county, the version of the county at Boca Chica where they have to negotiate certain test windows.
Iggy, thank you for the super chat. Mark, thank you for the super chat. CPR Daywalker, another super chat from earlier. And then Lexi asks, any thoughts on what the mystery structures being built might be? I am guessing you're talking about those white poles we've seen being erected to the base of some sort of mound. Chris, any speculation?
There's lots of speculation. There's quite a things with a few ideas we're chasing which seem viable. They vary from all sorts of things, from like a tank stand to all different areas of testing structures, shall we say. I'm chasing after one idea that we've heard, but I don't want to say anything without sounding stupid. We don't start saying water tanks and the friends there, do we? It's something that we don't yet know officially, but once it takes shape, because of all the structures surrounding it, we'll get a proper idea of what it'll be. Right now, it's just in the very early phase of being assembled.
Chris says I meant the SLS first stage could fit inside the Starship first stage, not the
No.
entire SLS. Okay.
Yeah.
NASA spaceflight. I feel like due to the zoom, Starship always feels wider. I 3D printed a Starship model and first thought it was tall and skinny. Through a 300mm lens, it looks like it's in the stream. Yeah, it is interesting how the perspective of things change with scale and whatnot.
Also, with the aero surfaces on Starship, that is quite deceptive when you see it,
that's
especially
a
when
good point.
extended.
Yeah, for sure.
And the aero surfaces always throw me off whenever I'm photographing it, because I personally like to put the object in the center of the frame most of the time, but the aero surfaces give you like an offset. So I've learned now, but for a long time I'd have a lot of shots that were almost what I wanted, but not quite, because I was centering the vehicle not accounting for those aero surfaces. It's tricky. The perspective of these things is particularly hard to capture sometimes.
Trying to find some more questions. Again, tag us in chat if you have a question, so it goes into our queue. Are these two sections just being welded together? I think so. I'm not sure if they're welding it right now. I think that's light or grinding, but I'm not quite sure why we have not seen that final gap close yet. Perhaps they're just making sure it is aligned properly.
Yeah, it could be that they're just making sure, or it could be, maybe it's snagged on something, one of the lead-ins, or something's giving them a little bit of trouble, so they're diagnosing what the issue is before forcing it, or backing out and trying again from a different angle, or what have you. Hard to say. I brought my radio, because that one time when they stacked serial number 1, I was able to get crane audio. I have not picked up anything today, unfortunately. So no insight in. Go for it.
No, I was just saying, I mentioned that when you got the audio, and it was amazing skill, because I had no idea what was involved with these hoists and crane operations, and that was fascinating audio. That was superb.
Yeah,
video.
That was really, really special. That was I will always really love, and not only that, but also because it was serial number 1. I mean, yeah, it was Mark III, but serial number 1, and that's the one we got crane audio for. That's really special to me. But like I said, nothing today, unfortunately, but that doesn't mean I'll stop trying.
I'll take us out wide for a quick second. If you're just joining us, that is the current view in the high bay in Boca Chica. The crane has stacked the liquid oxygen tank on top of the CH4 tank, the methane tank of the first super heavy booster called BN1, and the crane has done that by lowering itself down through the top of the roof, where they cut a hole for the crane to reach down. So, an interesting bit of engineering there.
I may have said to some people that I would eat a hat or something equivalent to that if they actually lifted through the roof of the high bay, but lo and behold, that's what they're doing. Thankfully, I don't think I said I would eat a hat. I forget exactly what I said, but I think I said I would eat something unpleasant, or maybe I said I would eat beans. Oh God, I really hate beans. Please,
I
no.
love beans.
I
tell you what, Jack, I'll eat the beans on your behalf as part of the bet.
Look at that. What a guy. Thank you so much.
Mike, thank you so much. You guys rock. Says Mike, we appreciate the support. Would it make more sense to install the bridge crane before stacking SF-15, says Joshua. I think that's a fair point, Jack. Because that high bay only has so much space, so perhaps they might have to get some construction crews in there to get the crane installed, but on the other hand, the crane is going to be located at the very top, so I'm not sure if it would actually get in the way of it, because a Starship is quite shorter than a super heavy booster, so it's not going to be interfering with the ceiling quite like the Super Heavy booster is?
I think, I think part of it is just they could get the booster stacked immediately if they didn't wait for the crane. Whether or not
Yeah.
the crane will fit or be able to lift it that high, I don't know, but I think they could get it done now like this, so they did.
And I've rewinded 20 minutes and done an A/B test, and I do not see any progress. So I'm not sure how long it's going to be until we see that final inch or two get closed, but they are nearly there.
It's pretty much done. I mean, that was the main thing, was the lift.
Yeah.
And then the lowering and over the guides. This process now, what we'll see roughly within the difference of an inch or so, is going to take a few days at least to install. Well, they've got the platform installed, haven't they? So the platform's installed where they can just start welding it. I think we're there. I think we've covered the event.
Yeah, so I don't know if we want to wrap up sooner rather than later, but I'm not sure if it's going to be like 3 hours until they close the final 2 inches. But what we really wanted to see today was this shot, the visual of the first fully stacked, almost super heavy booster. So I don't know. Chat, you let us know if we are allowed to rest our voices, or if you insist that we stay alive until
Don't ask him that.
The final inch is closed.
Yeah, wait for
I have
Chuck to
a
go.
feeling.
Keep going. You're our
I have a
dancing
feeling
monkeys.
from this angle, you're not going to see any difference, but from the tight shot, you're going to see a couple pixels change.
Yeah, I'm shooting a time lapse at 1,000 millimeters. It'll probably be really shaky, but it's just the section that's being joined together. So if it's at all usable or good, that we'll have that maybe for the daily video or up on Twitter or something later. So you'll have the detail that you want. Trust me.
Point, we've got the daily video to come later that have all the close-up views. This was a live view and it was brilliant. I must admit, the bots have done a fantastic job getting us these views, and Michael, of course.
Chat really wants to stay alive, so I think we might work a compromise here. What if we wrap up the commentary, but we keep the cameras rolling? How does that sound, Jack and Chris?
That works for me. I need to eat some beans.
Yeah, I'm getting really spotty comms here, so sorry if I'm a robot, but that sounds good to me.
Yep, and I mean, if this goes on for 4 hours, I might just end the stream because we are burning lots of data right now, but thank you all for the super chat so far, and we've got a lot of support on the stream, so I think we can afford to let this roll a bit longer. So with that, I think we're going to wrap up the commentary, but we will continue to show these live views in Boca Chica. Thank you so much, Jack, for hopping on here and giving us some additional commentary support as we saw this stacking happen.
Thank you, everybody, for coming to our SLS and Starship webinar.
We also had Chris Gebhardt on earlier during our SLS coverage. We had Brady out in the field setting up a camera for our live stream, which is why we got to dodge all the NASA TV hosts and got a clean feed of the tests from start to finish. So really appreciate Brady helping out with that camera. We also had Philip Sloss out there at Stennis Space Center conducting a bunch of interviews for our articles. And then Chris Bergen, of course, was on the stream for the full duration with me, helping out with the commentary, especially during this long stacking process. So I appreciate the support, Chris.
That was fun. Been a good day.
And then finally, and most importantly, Roadside in Boca Chica, Mary is currently catching up on all the action and getting us a lot of video for our daily. So stay tuned. We'll have that video published in a bit. But for now, we're going to sign off on commentary. I am Michael Breitler from NASASpaceflight.com, and our live video will continue as we continue to wait for the final millimeters or inches, whatever you want to call it, of the super heavy stacking coverage. But thank you all for joining us. Okay, I am back. I will turn down that ambient slightly, but that is what looks to be a fully stacked starship. I think we finally just saw that final bit of daylight close. So that is quite exciting. Now that we see that gap closed, I can take us out wide to the other robot, but that is the view from Boca Chica right now. The first ever stacking of a super heavy booster. Wow, what a sight.
History, another bit of history has been made in Boca Chica, and paving the way for more bits of history. I mean, imagine being there for the first Saturn V stacked, or the first Shuttle stack, or any of that. That's what's happening right now. That's what we're watching. Good old-fashioned tank watching today, seeing some history get made.
And if you remember where we were 1 year ago today, we were still in the starships cannot maintain flight pressure phase. The Starship SN3 anomaly occurred on April 3rd, 2020. That was, of course, when they had a testing configuration error that caused the Starship vehicle to collapse on itself during a cryogenic proof test. And it was not until SN4 on April 26th that a Starship vehicle successfully passed the cryogenic proof test for the first time. So in a span of less than a year, we've gone from Starship prototypes not being able to withstand flight pressures to full-scale Starship vehicles flying, and now towards the first ever stacking of a full-scale Super Heavy booster. So the rate of progress in Boca Chica is just so incredible. But thank you for hopping on again, Jack. I think that is going to finally wrap up the live stream here. Thank you all for watching, and that is the first ever fully stacked Super Heavy booster. I will just say that one more time because it is quite the milestone. But we will see you all probably on Monday for the Starship SN11 static fire. It does not look like we're getting a road closure for tomorrow. If that changes, I will post some updates on Twitter, but it looks like the SN11 static fire might be headed for next week, but when that happens, we'll be live again from Boca Chica, and our next live stream is probably going to be NSF Live on Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern, most likely. I will again tweet if something changes, but until next time, see you all later. I might have cut you off there, Jack, to say it one more time.
Webinar.
Chamber pressure looks good. Following up. Roger, roll, Atlantic. Water towers fly! Flight downside speed off. Speed off.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.